The security guard's hand cracked across her shoulder like a gunshot, and Dr. Sarah Mitchell's evening clutch went skidding across the marble floor of Boston's Ocean View Grand Hotel. Around her, smartphones rose like weapons, capturing every second of her humiliation. The crowd whispered, smirked, judged. This woman in the simple cream dress didn't belong at their elite medical leadership summit. She looked like just another nurse who'd wandered too far from the service entrance. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that the woman they were about to throw out had commanded battlefield trauma units in 3 war zones, held the rank of lieutenant colonel, and was scheduled to take the stage in exactly 47 minutes as the evening's keynote speaker. But she wasn't going to tell them that, not yet. She was going to let them finish digging their own graves first. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end to see how this unfolds. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this resonates with you, hit that like button. Now, let's get back to Boston, where everything is about to explode. The October wind cut through Boston's financial district with the kind of cold that promised an early winter. Sarah Mitchell stood at the Platinum VIP entrance of the Ocean View Grand Hotel, her cream-colored dress moving softly in the breeze, her dark hair pulled back in a simple twist. She was 44 years old, and she carried herself with the kind of stillness that came from years of making life-or-death decisions in impossible circumstances. The security guard blocking her path was younger, broader, and increasingly aggressive. His name tag read Marcus Webb, and his hand was still pressed against her shoulder from where he'd shoved her. "Ma'am, I've told you twice already. This entrance is for VIP guests only. Staff and general attendees use the south doors." His voice carried across the hotel's grand entrance portico, deliberately loud enough to draw attention. Sarah didn't move. She met his eyes with the same calm she'd used when facing down hostile crowds in refugee camps. "I have a credential," she said quietly. "It's in my bag." "I don't need to see a credential. I can see what you are." Marcus's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're not dressed for this event. You don't have the look. Now move along before I have to call backup." Behind him, the real guests streamed through the platinum doors. Men in tailored tuxedos, women in designer gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They glanced at the confrontation with that particular kind of interested detachment wealthy people reserved for watching someone else's misfortune. A few phones came up, angled casually to capture the scene. Sarah let the moment breathe. She'd learned long ago that silence often revealed more than confrontation. "I'd like to speak with the event coordinator," she said. "The event coordinator doesn't have time for this." Marcus stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "Last chance. South entrance or you leave the property." A woman appeared from inside the hotel, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone who managed expensive problems for expensive people. Her badge identified her as Christina Vale, event director. She was in her early 50s, blonde, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost $3,000. Her expression was already set to dismissal before she reached them. "What seems to be the problem?" Christina's tone suggested the problem was obvious, and its name was Sarah. "This woman is trying to access the VIP entrance without proper authorization," Marcus said. "She claims to have credentials but won't show identification." "My identification is in my bag," Sarah repeated. Which your security guard knocked to the ground. She nodded toward where her clutch had landed near the entrance pillars. Christina retrieved the bag with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. She opened it briefly, glanced inside, and her expression shifted to something colder. "Medical briefing materials. Emergency protocols." She looked up at Sarah. "You're a nurse." It wasn't a question, it was a classification, a dismissal. "The nursing staff entrance is on the east side of the building," Christina continued. "If you're working the medical support station tonight, you should have received specific instructions about where to check in. This entrance is reserved for our keynote speakers, board members, and major donors." "I'm aware of what this entrance is for," Sarah said. "Then you understand you don't belong here." Christina handed the bag back to Marcus rather than to Sarah. "Mr. Webb, please escort this woman to the appropriate entrance. If she continues to resist, contact BPD and have her removed from the property." A man in a tuxedo paused near them, his silver hair gleaming under the entrance lights. His face carried that particular smugness of someone who'd never been told no in his entire privileged life. Having trouble with the help, Christina? Nothing I can't handle, Dr. Thornwood. Christina's smile was practiced, professional, poisonous. Dr. Thornwood, Sarah recognized the name from the donor list she'd reviewed that afternoon, leaned against one of the marble pillars. These events are getting less exclusive every year. Soon we'll have orderlies trying to crash cocktail hour. Laughter rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Someone else muttered, "Check her bag. Make sure she's not stealing anything." Sarah felt the old familiar burn in her chest, the one that had flared in countless moments like this across 2 decades of military service. The assumption that she was less than, that her value could be determined by a glance, that her presence in spaces of power must be either a mistake or a theft. She'd felt it in officers' briefings where men talked over her analysis. She'd felt it in international conferences where her uniform apparently mattered less than her gender. She'd felt it in 1,000 small moments that accumulated into a weight she carried everywhere. But she'd also learned something those people in their expensive clothes would never understand. Calm was a weapon. Patience was strategy. And sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was let people reveal exactly who they were before you showed them what you could do about it. "Of course," Sarah said softly. She took her bag from Marcus's hand and placed it on the marble table near the entrance. "Please, look through everything." Christina's eyebrows rose slightly. She clearly hadn't expected compliance. She pulled items out one by one: medical briefing folders, emergency response protocols, trauma assessment guides, a leather portfolio embossed with an insignia most of them wouldn't recognize, and finally, a credential card. Christina held it up to the light, frowning. "This is a military medical credential. It's expired." "It's retired," Sarah corrected quietly. "There's a difference." "Not to me." Christina dropped the card back into the bag. "Military nurses are still nurses. The professional entrance is that way." She pointed. Sarah didn't move. Instead, she did something that would later be analyzed in a dozen think pieces and training seminars. She pulled out her phone and began taking photographs. Click. Christina's face. Click. Marcus's badge. Click. Dr. Thornwood's amused expression. Click. Every guest who'd stopped to watch, to judge, to laugh. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Christina's voice went sharp. "Documenting." Sarah's tone remained perfectly even. "For the record, you don't get to make a record, you're trespassing. I have an invitation. I have credentials. I have every right to be here." Sarah lowered her phone. "But I understand that you've decided otherwise. Please continue." Something about those last 2 words landed wrong. Christina's eyes narrowed. "Marcus, I want her off the property. Now." But before Marcus could move, a new voice cut through the tension. "Wait." A young woman pushed through the crowd, her phone held high, a bright ring light clipped to the top. Her badge identified her as Melissa Torres, and the logo on her screen announced she was live streaming. "I'm getting all of this. Don't stop on my account." Melissa was a wellness influencer with 2 million followers, invited to the gala to promote the hospital network's new holistic health initiative. She sensed drama the way sharks sensed blood in water, and she'd just gone live with a caption that read, "Elite Medical Gala refuses entry to nurse, discrimination in action." The viewer count was already climbing, 800, 1,200, 2,000. Christina's professional mask cracked. "This is a private event. You need to stop filming." "The entrance is a public space," Melissa said cheerfully, "and my followers are very interested in how medical professionals treat each other. Keep going. This is amazing content." Dr. Thornwood stepped forward, his smile gone. "Young lady, I suggest you put that phone away before you damage your relationship with some very important institutions." "Is that a threat?" Melissa angled the camera toward him. "Dr. Richard Thornwood, Chief of Cardiology at Sterling Memorial, Everyon. He's currently telling me to stop filming discrimination. Comments are going crazy." Sarah watched the scene unfold with the detached calm of someone who'd seen power structures collapse before. She'd watched corrupt contractors lose million-dollar defense contracts. She'd seen incompetent commanders relieved in the field. She'd witnessed justice arrive in unexpected ways, and she'd learned to recognize the moment when the tide turned. This was that moment. Christina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. Melissa, I need you to delete that stream immediately. Not happening. Melissa was reading comments aloud now. Oh, people are asking what hospital system this is. Should I tell them? The Ocean View Grand is hosting the Northeast Medical Leadership Summit, sponsored by Commonwealth Health Network. There you go, chat. The viewer count hit 5,000. Christina looked at Marcus. Get hotel security. Get the police if you have to. I want both of these women removed. On what grounds? Sarah asked. Her voice was still quiet, but something in it made everyone stop. I was invited to this event. I have documentation. I've committed no crime. The only thing I've done is exist in a space where you've decided I don't belong. You're causing a disturbance, Christina snapped. I'm standing still. You're the one who's escalating. A hotel manager appeared, summoned by the commotion. His name tag identified him as Gerald Foster, and he carried himself with the smooth authority of someone who'd spent decades managing crises in five-star establishments. What's going on here? Christina grabbed his arm. We have an unauthorized person attempting to access the VIP entrance. Security has asked her to leave. She's refusing, and now this influencer is live streaming the whole thing. Gerald looked at Sarah, really looked at her. His eyes took in the cream dress, the simple jewelry, the composure that didn't match the chaos around her. Ma'am, do you have an invitation to tonight's event? I do. May I see it? Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was formal cardstock embossed with the summit logo. Gerald read it, and his expression changed. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly. He looked from the invitation to Sarah and back again. Oh my God, he whispered. Christina leaned over. What? Gerald didn't answer her. He was staring at Sarah with something approaching horror. Dr. Mitchell? Sarah didn't smile. She didn't need to. Yes. You're Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, retired. That's correct. The words fell into the crowd like stones into still water, and the ripples spread fast. Someone in the back pulled out their phone, typing frantically. Another guest gasped. Dr. Thornwood's smug expression evaporated. Christina snatched the invitation from Gerald's hands and read it again, slower this time, her lips moving as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. You're the keynote speaker. Yes. You established the Mitchell Foundation for Trauma Care Ethics. Yes. Your foundation funded the emergency medicine initiative this entire summit is built around. Partially funded, Sarah corrected, along with the Department of Defense, the Veterans Administration, and Commonwealth Health Network's charitable arm. Gerald had gone from pale to gray. Dr. Mitchell, I am so profoundly sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding. Sarah's voice cut through his apology like a surgical blade. Your staff looked at me and decided what I was worth based on how I looked. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Christina tried to speak. If you had known, you would have treated me differently. That's exactly the problem. Sarah picked up her bag. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't check credentials. You saw a woman in a simple dress and assumed she couldn't possibly belong in your exclusive space. Marcus had backed away, his earlier aggression completely gone. He looked like he wanted to melt into the marble floor. Melissa's live stream was going ballistic. The viewer count had topped 10,000, and the comments were a flood of outrage, shock, and demands for accountability. This is insane, she narrated for her audience. They literally tried to throw out the keynote speaker, the actual guest of honor, because they thought she was just a nurse. There's no such thing as just a nurse, Sarah said, and her voice carried the kind of authority that made everyone stop talking. Nurses save more lives than most doctors ever will. They work longer hours for less recognition, and they hold the healthcare system together with skill and dedication most people never see. The problem isn't that you thought I was a nurse. The problem is that you treated someone you thought was a nurse as if she was worthless. The silence that followed was absolute. Gerald tried again. Dr. Mitchell, please, if we could speak privately. No. Sarah's refusal was gentle, but immovable. We're well past private conversations. Your staff publicly humiliated someone they believed was beneath them. Your guests joined in. That influencer captured all of it and broadcast it to thousands of people. You don't get to hide this now. Dr. Thornwood cleared his throat. Now see here. This has all been blown out of proportion. A simple miscommunication. Nothing about this was simple, Sarah interrupted. You laughed at someone you thought was an orderly trying to crash cocktail hour. You suggested they check my bag for stolen items. You participated in public humiliation because you believed there would be no consequences. She turned to look at him directly. Did you know that my keynote tonight is about bias under pressure in healthcare institutions? Thornwood's face went red. I was going to use theoretical examples, Sarah continued. Case studies from medical literature. Anonymous scenarios designed to prompt reflection without causing discomfort. She paused. But I think I have something better now. Christina's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. She looked at the screen, and whatever she saw there made her sway slightly on her expensive heels. The board is calling. I imagine they are. Sarah's tone was almost sympathetic. Almost. Melissa's stream has been picked up by news aggregators. Twitter is trending with hashtags about this. Someone already identified Dr. Thornwood. The Commonwealth Health Network's main account is getting flooded with questions about discrimination at their flagship event. Gerald's phone was ringing too. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, and went even paler. Yes, sir. She's right here. Yes, I understand, of course. He lowered the phone. Dr. Mitchell, that was the hotel's executive director. He's on his way down. He wants to speak with you personally. I'm sure he does. He's also asking, he wants to know what it would take to resolve this quietly. Sarah smiled for the first time all evening, and it was the most dangerous expression anyone there had ever seen. Quietly? Mr. Foster, there are currently 17,000 people watching this moment live. It's been screen recorded and shared across multiple platforms. Several journalists have already reached out to Melissa for interviews. This stopped being quiet the moment your event director decided I was too ordinary to deserve basic courtesy. A black town car pulled up to the entrance, moving with the kind of speed that suggested emergency. A man in his 60s emerged, his tuxedo immaculate, his expression thunderous. He took in the scene, the crowd, the phones, the live stream, Sarah standing calm in the center of it all, and his jaw tightened. Everyone inside, he ordered. Now, this entrance is closed. The crowd scattered like startled birds. Dr. Thornwood tried to blend into the exodus, but the man's voice stopped him. Not you, Richard. You stay. The man turned to Sarah. Dr. Mitchell, I'm James Kellerman, Executive Director of the Ocean View Grand. I've been trying to reach you for the past 10 minutes. I had my phone silenced, Sarah said. I was dealing with your security team. Kellerman's eyes found Marcus, who looked like he wanted to disappear. You're dismissed. Clear out your locker. Your employment here is terminated effective immediately. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, and walked away without a word. Kellerman turned to Christina. You're on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Your access to all hotel systems is revoked as of this moment. Christina's face crumpled. Mr. Kellerman, I was just following protocol. Your protocol, Kellerman said icily, resulted in the public humiliation of one of the most respected trauma care specialists in the country at an event her foundation helped fund, while being live streamed to 20,000 people and counting. I don't want to hear another word from you. Christina fled. Kellerman took a breath and faced Sarah again. Dr. Mitchell, on behalf of the Ocean View Grand and everyone involved in tonight's catastrophic failure, I apologize. There's no excuse for what happened here. No, Sarah agreed. There isn't. I understand you have every right to cancel your keynote, to withdraw your foundation's support, to pursue legal action. Whatever you decide, we'll cooperate fully. He paused. But I'm asking, begging, actually, for you to give me a chance to make this right. Sarah considered him. How? Let me be completely transparent with you, and with everyone watching. He nodded toward Melissa's phone, still streaming. This failure goes beyond one security guard or one event director. It's systemic, it's cultural, and it needs to be burned out at the root. I'm listening. I want to implement immediate changes. Mandatory bias training for every employee, from housekeeping to executive management. New verification protocols that don't rely on subjective assessment. A public accountability report detailing exactly what happened tonight and what we're doing to prevent it from ever happening again. Kellerman's voice was steady, but sweat gleamed on his forehead. And I want your foundation to oversee it all. Design the training, audit the implementation, hold us to the highest possible standard. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the October wind picked up, carrying the salt smell of Boston Harbor. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, the eternal sound of the city, emergencies unfolding, help racing to meet them. That's a start, she said finally, but it's not enough. Kellerman nodded as if he'd expected this. What else? Dr. Thornwood. Sarah turned to where the cardiologist stood, trying to be invisible. You suggested checking my bag for stolen items. You laughed at the idea of medical staff accessing your exclusive space. You used your position and your reputation to participate in public humiliation. Thornwood's voice came out thin. I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said. You always do. Sarah's gaze was surgical. I want you removed from the summit's advisory board. I want a public statement from Commonwealth Health Network disavowing your comments. And I want you to understand something very clearly. Your behavior tonight will follow you. When hospitals review your speaking engagements, they'll remember this. When professional organizations consider your membership, they'll remember this. You made a choice to be cruel in public, and the public will remember. Thornwood said nothing. There was nothing to say. Sarah turned back to Kellerman. As for tonight's keynote, I'll still deliver it, but I'm changing the content. I'm going to use this, all of this, as a case study in real-time institutional bias. The live stream stays up, the recordings stay public, and every single person who participated in what happened here will be named. Understood, Kellerman said quietly. One more thing. Sarah's voice softened slightly. The nurse who was supposed to staff the medical support station tonight, the one your event director thought I was. I want her name. I want to know her story, and I want her invited to sit in the front row for my keynote. Kellerman pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, and looked up. Her name is Rachel Vance. She's been with the hotel for 3 years. Emergency room background. I'm having someone find her now. Good. Sarah checked her watch. We have 40 minutes until the program starts. That gives you 40 minutes to fire everyone who needs to be fired, issue whatever statements need to be issued, and prepare your guests for a very different evening than they expected. And you? Sarah smiled again, and this time there was something almost warm in it. I'm going to go fix my makeup and review my notes, because I'm about to give the most important talk of my career and I want to make sure I get every word right. She walked toward the entrance, and this time no one stopped her. The doors opened automatically, and the warm light of the hotel's interior spilled out onto the cold October street. Melissa kept her camera rolling, narrating the triumphant entry of the woman they'd tried to throw out. But Sarah paused at the threshold and turned back. Mr. Kellerman? Yes, Dr. Mitchell? This moment, this disaster that you're now scrambling to contain, didn't start tonight. It started years ago, with 1,000 small decisions to value appearance over substance, credentials over character, power over people. What happened to me happens every day to people who don't have my background or my platform. They get dismissed, degraded, and discarded, and no one ever knows. No one ever cares. She let that sink in. Tonight you have a chance to care. Don't waste it. Then she walked inside and the doors closed behind her. In the aftermath, Kellerman stood in the cold, watching his phone light up with calls from board members, lawyers, and crisis management teams. Behind him, Marcus's security badge lay on the marble where he'd dropped it. Christina's access card was there too, abandoned in her flight. Melissa finally ended her live stream at 35,000 viewers. Her final comment was simple. Well, friends, I came here to cover a medical gala. I ended up witnessing something way more important. See you tomorrow with the full breakdown. Doctor. Thornwood sat on the entrance steps, his head in his hands, while his own phone filled with messages from colleagues who'd seen the stream, from hospital administrators asking for explanations, from professional organizations requesting statements. His career wasn't over, not quite, but it would never be the same. Inside the hotel, Sarah stood in the speaker's lounge, watching the ballroom fill through the one-way glass. The crowd was different now. Phones were out, whispers spreading. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had seen some version of the stream or heard about it secondhand. The energy in the room was electric, anticipatory, uncertain. A young woman in scrubs appeared beside her, escorted by one of Kellerman's assistants. She was in her late 20s, dark-skinned, with the kind of exhausted eyes Sarah recognized from every emergency room she'd ever worked in. "Dr. Mitchell? I'm Rachel Vance. They said you wanted to meet me?" Sarah extended her hand. "Thank you for coming. I understand you were supposed to work the medical support station tonight?" "Yes, ma'am. Though honestly, these events are usually pretty quiet. Mostly I'm there in case someone has too much champagne." Rachel's smile was nervous. "They told me something happened at the entrance, that it involved you." "It did." Sarah gestured to the chair beside her. "Sit with me a minute?" They sat, and Sarah told her a condensed version of the evening's events. Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to shock to anger. "They thought you were me," she said finally, "and they treated you like trash because of it." "Yes, that's—" Rachel struggled for words. "That's exactly how they usually treat me." "I know." Sarah's voice was gentle. "That's why I wanted to meet you, because what happened to me tonight was shocking to all those people out there. But for you, it's probably just Tuesday." Rachel laughed, but it was bitter. "Last month I had a patient's family member demand a real medical professional because they didn't believe a nurse could answer their questions. Last week a doctor yelled at me in front of the whole ER because I questioned his medication dosage, which was wrong, by the way. I was right and he was wrong, but I'm just a nurse, so—" She shrugged. "You get used to it. You shouldn't have to." "No," Rachel agreed. "But what choice do we have?" Sarah thought about that question. She thought about all the times she'd asked it herself in all the years before she'd had the rank, the credentials, the platform to push back. "You're sitting in the front row tonight," she said. "When I give my keynote, I'm going to tell them about you. Not by name, unless you give me permission, but your story. What it's like to be dismissed, doubted, degraded. What it costs the patients when healthcare systems don't value the people who do the actual work of saving lives." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You have my permission. Use my name. Tell them everything." She paused. "Will it change anything?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But silence definitely won't." A knock on the door interrupted them. Kellerman appeared, slightly out of breath. "Dr. Mitchell, we're ready to begin whenever you are. The board chair is prepared to introduce you with a full acknowledgement of tonight's events. We've also issued a press release detailing immediate personnel changes and policy reforms. And I've arranged for the full live stream of your keynote to be posted on our website and social media channels." "Good." Sarah stood, smoothing her dress. "Rachel, would you walk out with me?" "Me?" "You. The woman I'm supposedly not good enough to be confused with." Sarah smiled. "Let's show them what that actually means." They walked together through the backstage area, past staff members who stopped and stared, past the audio technicians and lighting crew who'd heard what happened and couldn't quite believe they were seeing it resolved in real time. The ballroom doors opened and the murmur of 800 voices fell to absolute silence. The board chair took the podium. Her hand shook slightly as she gripped the lectern. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin tonight's program, I need to address an incident that occurred at our VIP entrance approximately 1 hour ago." The silence deepened. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our keynote speaker and the founder whose generosity made much of this summit possible, was denied entry to this building. She was publicly questioned, humiliated, and threatened with removal by our security staff and event management. This happened because our personnel made assumptions based on her appearance rather than verifying her credentials. This happened because we have failed, systematically and completely, to build a culture that values people over prejudice. Someone in the audience gasped. Others were already recording. As of tonight, several personnel have been terminated. Others have been placed on administrative leave. We are implementing immediate and comprehensive reforms, overseen by Dr. Mitchell's foundation, to ensure this never happens again. But before we move forward, Dr. Mitchell has requested the opportunity to speak directly about what occurred and what it means for all of us. The board chair stepped back, and Sarah walked to the podium. The lights were bright, but she could see faces in the crowd, some ashamed, some curious, some defensive. She could feel the weight of the moment, the way history sometimes crystallized into a single point that would be remembered, analyzed, learned from. "Good evening," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of the room. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army, retired. I spent 22 years in military medicine, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've run trauma units under rocket fire. I've performed field surgery with equipment held together by duct tape and prayer. I've held the hands of dying soldiers, and I've watched nurses work miracles with nothing but skill and determination. She paused. Tonight, at the entrance to this hotel, I was mistaken for one of those nurses, and I was treated as if that made me worthless. Rachel sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. But here's what I want you to understand. The tragedy of tonight isn't that they mistook me for a nurse. The tragedy is that they thought being a nurse meant I deserved to be shoved, mocked, and humiliated. The tragedy is that we have built systems in healthcare, in hospitality, in every industry represented in this room, where people believe their status gives them the right to degrade others. And we've built those systems so well that good people participate in cruelty without even realizing they're doing it. The room was absolutely still, and in that moment, the evening shattered into something new. Sarah let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the weight of her words settled into every corner of the ballroom. Then she continued, her voice steady, but carrying an edge that made people shift in their seats. Some of you witnessed what happened at the entrance tonight. Some of you participated, and some of you walked past it without a second thought because you assumed the system was working exactly as it should. She scanned the crowd, making eye contact with individuals who suddenly couldn't meet her gaze. That assumption is the problem. When we build hierarchies that rank human worth based on job titles, we create permission structures for abuse. And when those hierarchies become invisible, when they're just how things are, they become almost impossible to dismantle. A hand went up in the third row. Sarah nodded toward it. A woman in a silver evening gown stood, her voice carrying clearly. Dr. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Patricia Harlow, Chief of Staff at Riverside Medical. With all due respect, isn't there a difference between respecting professional hierarchies and discrimination? Hospitals have to function with clear chains of command. They do, Sarah agreed. But command structures and human dignity aren't mutually exclusive. You can respect someone's expertise while also treating them like a person who deserves basic courtesy. The question is whether your hierarchy serves patient care or whether it serves egos. Patricia sat down, her expression troubled. Sarah pulled out her phone and displayed it on the screen behind her. The live stream footage appeared. The moment Marcus shoved her shoulder, Christina's dismissive sneer, Dr. Thornwood's cruel laughter. The audience watched themselves, or people like themselves, participating in casual cruelty. This is what bias looks like in real time, Sarah said. Notice how quickly it escalated. Notice how many people joined in once the first person established that I was acceptable to mock. Notice how no one, not one person in that crowd, stopped to ask if maybe the security guard was wrong. The footage continued. Sarah paused it at the moment she'd placed her bag on the table, her face calm despite the humiliation. This is what 22 years of military discipline looks like, she said quietly. I learned very early that losing your temper in the face of injustice gives people permission to dismiss your complaint as emotional. So I stayed calm. I documented. I waited for the system to correct itself. She paused. The system didn't correct itself. It took a live stream going viral, a hotel director's panic, and the threat of massive public backlash to get anyone to even check my credentials. Rachel was nodding in the front row, and Sarah saw other heads nodding too, mostly women, mostly people of color, mostly people who'd lived some version of this story themselves. Here's what I want you to take from tonight, Sarah said. Every single person who participated in what happened to me thought they were doing the right thing. The security guard thought he was protecting an exclusive event. The event director thought she was maintaining standards. The guests who laughed thought they were sharing a joke about declining social order. No one woke up this morning planning to be cruel. They just operated within a system that told them cruelty toward certain people was acceptable, even necessary. She advanced to the next slide, a photo of a field hospital in Afghanistan. Sarah in combat fatigues, covered in dust and blood, her hands working on a soldier's chest while explosions lit the sky behind them. This is me 8 years ago, outside Kandahar. That soldier survived because a Navy corpsman, not a doctor, a corpsman, kept him alive during a 40-minute firefight until we could get him to surgery. That corpsman's name was Eric Huang. He was 19 years old, he'd been in country for 3 months, and he was the best trauma technician I ever worked with. Another slide appeared, a formal portrait of Eric in dress uniform, medals gleaming. Eric died 2 years ago, not in combat. He survived 3 deployments. He came home, went to nursing school, got hired at a civilian hospital. And he killed himself in the staff parking lot after a shift where a doctor screamed at him for 20 minutes in front of patients because Eric had questioned an order that would have killed someone. Sarah's voice didn't waver, but something in her eyes made the entire room hold its breath. The doctor faced no consequences. Eric's death was ruled unrelated to workplace stress. The system protected itself. The silence that followed was absolute and terrible. So when I tell you that what happened to me tonight matters, I'm not talking about my wounded pride. I'm talking about a culture that tells people their value is determined by their rank, their title, their position in a hierarchy that was designed by people who look like most of you and operates to benefit people who look like most of you. And I'm telling you that this culture kills people. Someone in the back started crying. Sarah heard it, but didn't acknowledge it. She had to keep going, had to push through while she had them listening. Tonight's keynote was supposed to be about crisis decision-making in trauma care. But I'm changing that. Because we just lived through a crisis, and I want to analyze it the way we'd analyze any medical emergency. We're going to do a full debriefing, and everyone in this room is going to participate. She pulled up a new slide, a timeline of the evening's events, minute by minute. 6:43 p.m. I arrive at the VIP entrance. Question: what triggered the security guard's initial response? A man in the 4th row spoke up without being called on. You didn't look like you belonged. Expand on that. He hesitated, then continued. You were dressed simply. You didn't have the presentation that people usually have at these events. So the trigger was my appearance, specifically that my appearance didn't match expectations for this tier of access. Sarah marked it on the screen. 6:44. The security guard physically shoves me. Question: what made him believe that was acceptable? No one answered. Sarah waited. Finally, a younger woman in the 5th row raised her hand. He assumed you wouldn't have the power to fight back. Correct. He made a calculation that the risk of touching me was lower than the risk of letting me through. That calculation was based on his assessment of my social and professional status. 6:47. Event director arrives and sides with security without checking credentials. Why? Patricia Harlow spoke again. Confirmation bias. She saw what the guard saw and assumed he was right. Yes. And what else? She didn't want to undermine her own staff in front of guests. Exactly. The system protecting itself. 6:51. Dr. Thornwood makes his comment about the help. What function did that serve? The room was silent again. Sarah let it stretch until someone in the back called out, it gave everyone else permission to join in. Precisely. One high-status person signals that mockery is acceptable, and suddenly everyone feels safe participating. It's the same mechanism that allows harassment, abuse, and violence to flourish in institutions. Someone with authority sets the tone, and everyone else falls in line. She clicked to another slide showing social media screenshots, the hashtags that had trended, the news outlets that had picked up the story, the public response. By 7:15, this incident had gone viral. By 7:30, it was national news. By 7:45, the hotel had terminated 2 employees and put a 3rd on leave. The question is, why did it take public exposure to trigger accountability? A man in an expensive suit stood up. Dr. Mitchell, I'm David Kramer, hospital legal counsel. I think you're being somewhat unfair. Systems have protocols for addressing complaints. If you'd filed a formal grievance, I would have been told it was a misunderstanding, Sarah interrupted. I would have been asked to consider how my own behavior might have contributed to the confusion. I would have been encouraged to resolve it quietly to avoid embarrassing the institution. And in 6 months, after an internal investigation that went nowhere, I would have received a form letter apologizing for any inconvenience. Am I wrong? Kramer's silence was answer enough. This is why transparency matters, Sarah continued. This is why Melissa Torres's live stream was the most important thing that happened tonight. Because institutions will protect themselves unless the cost of protection becomes too high. You need witnesses, you need documentation, you need leverage. She pulled up the final slide, a split screen showing the before and after. On the left, the crowd mocking her at the entrance. On the right, this same crowd sitting in rapt attention to her words. Same people, same evening, different context. The only thing that changed was information. When you thought I was a nurse, I was beneath you. When you learned I was a doctor, a lieutenant colonel, a keynote speaker, suddenly I mattered. But I'm the same person. The only difference is the story you told yourself about my worth. Rachel stood up in the front row, and when she spoke, her voice shook. Can I say something? Sarah nodded. I've worked in emergency medicine for 6 years. I've saved lives. I've held patients' hands while they died. I've worked double shifts when the hospital was understaffed, and I've stayed calm when doctors panicked, and I've caught medication errors that would have killed people. And every single day, someone treats me like I'm stupid, or lazy, or in the way. Patients, doctors, administrators, even other nurses sometimes. And I'm supposed to just take it because that's how healthcare works. Tears ran down her face, but her voice stayed steady. What happened to Dr. Mitchell tonight happens to me every week. The only difference is nobody films it, and nobody cares. The silence that followed Rachel's words was different, heavier. Several people in the audience were crying now, and Sarah could see the realization spreading across faces. The understanding that this wasn't an isolated incident, that they'd been participating in a system of casual cruelty and calling it professionalism. Sarah stepped away from the podium and walked to where Rachel stood. She took the younger woman's hand. "This is Rachel Vance," Sarah said to the room. "When your event staff thought I was her, they treated me like garbage. But Rachel isn't garbage. She's a healthcare hero who gets paid a fraction of what most of you make while doing work that's just as vital, if not more so. And the fact that mistaking me for her was treated as an insult worth public humiliation should horrify every single one of you." She led Rachel back to her seat and returned to the podium. "Here's what happens next," Sarah said. "The Ocean View Grand has agreed to implement comprehensive bias training. But I don't trust training alone. Training without accountability is just performance. So I'm establishing an oversight committee, and Rachel is going to be on it, along with 3 other nurses, 2 paramedics, a hospital custodian, and a patient advocate. They're going to audit every policy, every protocol, every interaction between this hotel and healthcare institutions. And they're going to have the power to revoke event contracts if standards aren't met." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone in the back called out, "You can't give that kind of power to who?" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "To the people who actually do the work? To the ones who see how these systems fail every single day? Why not? We've given power to executives who've never touched a patient. We've given power to administrators who haven't worked a clinical shift in decades. Maybe it's time we gave power to the people who actually know what they're talking about." David Kramer stood again. "Dr. Mitchell, with respect, you're talking about upending established institutional hierarchies. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's not sustainable. Healthcare requires clear authority structures. Healthcare requires competent, compassionate people making good decisions under pressure. Authority structures should serve that goal. When they don't, they need to change." Sarah's gaze was unwavering. "And if you're more worried about preserving hierarchy than about the lives lost, because that hierarchy silences the people trying to save them, then you're part of the problem." Kramer sat down heavily. The mood in the room had shifted dramatically. Some people looked angry, defensive, cornered. Others looked shaken, as if seeing their own behavior clearly for the first time. A few looked inspired, energized by the possibility of something different. Sarah checked her watch. "We have 30 minutes left. I'm opening the floor. If you have questions, concerns, or your own stories to share, now's the time." The floodgates opened. A nurse from Boston General stood and described being sexually harassed by a surgeon for 2 years with no recourse because he was too valuable to the hospital. A physician assistant talked about being blamed for a doctor's mistake because no one would believe a PA over an MD. A hospital custodian described being made to clean up hazardous materials without proper protective equipment because complaining would get him fired. A patient advocate shared stories of families being lied to about medical errors because the institution prioritized reputation over honesty. Story after story. 20 minutes of testimony from people who'd been holding these experiences inside for years, waiting for permission to speak. Sarah stood to the side and let them talk, let the room hear what it had been ignoring. Finally, a woman in the very back stood up. She was older, 70 at least, wearing a gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of old money and social power. Dr. Mitchell, I'm Eleanor Ashford. I sit on the boards of 4 major hospitals and 2 medical schools. I've been in healthcare philanthropy for 40 years. She paused. And everything you've said tonight is true. I've watched these systems damage people. I've watched good nurses driven out because they wouldn't tolerate abuse. I've watched talented doctors leave medicine because the culture was toxic. I've watched patients die because hospitals were more worried about liability than honesty. And I've done nothing about it because I benefited from those same systems. The room held its breath. So I'm asking you, Eleanor continued, what do you need? Not platitudes, not promises. What actual resources, support, or pressure would make a difference? Sarah met her eyes across the ballroom. Money, power, consequences. The 3 things institutions actually respond to. I need funding for the oversight committee I just described. I need people in positions of authority willing to enforce new standards even when it's uncomfortable. And I need accountability mechanisms with teeth, not internal review boards that slap wrists, but real consequences that make it more expensive to maintain toxic systems than to change them. Eleanor nodded slowly. My foundation will fund the oversight committee. $1 million to start, renewable annually based on results. And I'll leverage my board positions to push for the structural changes you're describing. She looked around the room at the other wealthy donors. In fact, I'm challenging everyone here at the major donor level to match my commitment. If you're not willing to put your money toward fixing the problems you've benefited from, then stop claiming you care about healthcare. The challenge landed like a gauntlet thrown. Several people pulled out their phones immediately. Others looked uncomfortable but trapped by social pressure. Within 5 minutes, Sarah had commitments totaling $7 million. But as the energy in the room shifted toward this new possibility, Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. Through the ballroom's back doors, visible through the glass panels, hotel security was converging. Not the regular guards. These were different. Tactical gear. Serious faces. Moving with purpose toward the main entrance. Kellerman appeared at Sarah's elbow, his face pale. We have a situation. I can see that. It's not about tonight. Or rather it is, but he struggled for words. Dr. Thornwood left about 20 minutes ago. He just tried to access the hospital where he works. They've locked him out pending investigation of tonight's events. He's not taking it well. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd seen this before. The moment when someone whose entire identity was built on status and power suddenly had that identity stripped away. Some people retreated. Others lashed out. Where is he now? Outside, in the parking structure. He's demanding to speak with you. He's saying this is all your fault, that you've destroyed his career over nothing, that you're on a witch hunt. Kellerman's voice dropped. He's also saying he has a concealed carry permit and he's armed. The ballroom's energy hadn't changed yet. People were still making commitments, still riding the wave of collective purpose. But Sarah could see the tactical team positioning themselves at exits, could see the subtle shift as hotel security moved into protective stances. Rachel had noticed too. She appeared at Sarah's side. What's happening? Possible threat situation. I need you to help keep people calm. What kind of threat? Sarah met her eyes. The kind where a man who's lost everything decides to take someone down with him. Rachel's face went hard. I've done active shooter drills. Tell me what you need. Before Sarah could answer, the ballroom doors burst open, not from the tactical team's entrance, but from a side door that should have been locked. Dr. Richard Thornwood stood in the doorway, his tuxedo disheveled, his face red with rage and tears. And in his right hand, clearly visible, was a handgun. The screaming started immediately. People dove under tables, scrambled for exits, pulled out phones to call 911. The tactical team was moving, but they were too far away, blocked by panicking crowds. Rachel grabbed Sarah's arm to pull her down, but Sarah stayed standing. Richard, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with the same authority she'd used in combat zones. Look at me! Thornwood's eyes found hers. They were wild, desperate, completely unmoored. You destroyed me, he said, his voice cracked. 28 years of medicine, everything I built, gone because of one comment, one moment, one stupid joke. Put the gun down. You don't get to give me orders. You don't get to come into my city, my event, and decide my life is worthless because I laughed at the wrong time. Sarah took a step toward him. Behind her, she heard Kellerman hiss her name in warning, but she ignored him. Every instinct from her combat training was screaming at her, but she pushed past it. This wasn't enemy territory. This was a broken man in a ballroom, and she'd dealt with broken men before. Your life isn't worthless, Richard. But what you did tonight, what you've probably been doing for years, that does have consequences. Consequences? You've taken everything. He raised the gun, not quite pointing it at anyone, but the threat was clear. My job called. My hospital. They terminated me. Effective immediately. Pending investigation. Based on a fucking live stream of me making a joke. It wasn't just a joke. It was. It was one comment. How does that justify destroying someone's career? Sarah took another step closer. The tactical team was signaling her to get down, get back, get safe. She ignored them. You want to know why one comment mattered so much? Her voice was quiet now. Intimate? Meant only for him even though hundreds were listening. Because it wasn't one comment. It was 30 years of comments just like it. 30 years of putting people beneath you so you could feel powerful. 30 years of teaching younger doctors that cruelty was professionalism. 30 years of damage that accumulated until one live stream finally made it visible. I never hurt anyone. You don't know that. You have no idea who you've hurt because you never bothered to look. Sarah was close enough now to see the sweat on his face, the tremor in his hands. How many nurses stopped speaking up in your operating rooms because you'd humiliated them before? How many patients suffered because your staff was too afraid of you to question your orders? How many talented people left medicine because people like you made it unbearable? The gun wavered. You want to shoot someone, Richard? Shoot me. I'm the one who exposed you. I'm the one who stood up when I was supposed to stay quiet. Pull that trigger and make me the villain you need me to be. She opened her arms. But it won't change what you did. It won't change what you are. It'll just prove that everything I said about you was right. For a long moment, nothing moved. The ballroom was frozen in that terrible space between violence and resolution, where every breath felt like it might tip the balance. Then Thornwood's face crumpled, the gun dropped to his side, and he began to sob, deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere he'd probably kept locked away his entire adult life. The tactical team moved in immediately, securing the weapon, pulling him gently to the ground, checking him for other threats while reading him his rights. Sarah stood still, watching, feeling the adrenaline crash through her system like a wave. Rachel was beside her suddenly, along with two other nurses from the audience. They formed a protective circle without being asked, professional instinct overriding personal fear. Kellerman appeared, looking shell-shocked. Dr. Mitchell, are you... I'm fine. You just talked down an armed man in front of 800 witnesses. I did what the situation required. That's not normal. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been exhaustion, or might have been dark humor. James, nothing about tonight has been normal. The ballroom was clearing out in controlled chaos, security guiding people to safe exits, staff checking for injuries, phone calls being made to every relevant authority. But a core group remained, clustered near the front where Sarah stood. Rachel, Eleanor Ashford, Patricia Harlow, several other nurses and doctors who'd shared their stories. They formed a circle around Sarah, not quite protection, but solidarity. Eleanor spoke first. I'm increasing my foundation commitment to $2 million. This oversight committee needs armed security. The committee needs legitimacy more than security, Sarah said. Although I appreciate the thought. You just prevented a mass shooting. I think you've earned the right to decide what you need. Sarah shook her head. That's exactly backwards. I'm not the hero of this story. I'm just someone who had the platform and the training to do what needed doing. The real heroes are the people who live with this system every day and keep showing up anyway. She looked at Rachel. People like her. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face changed. Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this. She turned the screen around. It showed a news alert. Armed standoff at medical gala ends peacefully. Keynote speaker prevents violence. Below it, trending hashtags. Hashtag Sarah Mitchell, hashtag healthcare reform, hashtag systemic change. And below that, a statement from Commonwealth Health Network. In light of tonight's events, Commonwealth Health Network is launching an immediate comprehensive review of institutional culture across all facilities. Dr. Sarah Mitchell has been asked to lead the investigation with full authority to implement necessary reforms. Sarah read it twice. I didn't agree to that. Maybe not yet, Eleanor said. But you will. Because you know what happens if you don't. This moment, this momentum, it evaporates. People forget. Systems protect themselves. And in 6 months, everything goes back to how it was. She was right. Sarah knew she was right. This was the pivot point, the moment where real change became possible or died forever. I'll need full autonomy, Sarah said. No oversight from current board members. Direct reporting to an independent ethics committee. And the power to fire anyone, regardless of position, who obstructs the investigation. Done. I'll need Rachel and the other frontline workers involved in every decision. Of course. And I'll need Thornwood's case handled with actual justice, not just performance. That means psychiatric evaluation, appropriate legal consequences, but also treatment. Because what we saw tonight is what happens when people are allowed to build their entire identity on toxic systems. We have to address the people and the structures. Eleanor pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm connecting you with the hospital network president right now. You can negotiate terms directly. While Sarah was drawn into rapid-fire coordination with Eleanor and other board members, Rachel pulled out her own phone. She'd been recording since Thornwood entered the ballroom, and now she posted the footage with a simple caption. This is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when someone with power chooses transparency over protection. Dr. Sarah Mitchell just saved lives twice tonight, once by exposing bias, once by preventing violence. Healthcare needs more of this. The post went viral in minutes, but while the ballroom erupted into planning sessions and coordination calls, while Sarah found herself at the center of a rapidly mobilizing reform movement, while the tactical team led Thornwood away in handcuffs and the media descended on the hotel like locusts, while all of that was happening, none of them noticed the man in the back of the ballroom. He was older, distinguished, wearing a tuxedo that fit too perfectly to be rented. He'd been there all evening, watching everything unfold with the quiet attention of someone who understood systems and power better than anyone in the room. His name was Dr. Marcus Castellano, and he was the director of the National Medical Ethics Board, the organization that controlled licensing, accreditation, and professional standards for every doctor in the country. And as he watched Sarah Mitchell take on hospital systems, philanthropic boards, and armed threats with the same unwavering calm, he pulled out his phone and made a call. We have a problem, he said quietly. Sarah Mitchell is going to tear apart every protective structure we've built. And if we don't stop her now, she's going to succeed. The person on the other end of Castellano's call answered on the first ring. How bad? Worse than we anticipated. She's got public support, viral momentum, and Eleanor Ashford just pledged $2 million to fund an oversight committee. Commonwealth Health Network is offering her investigative authority. Castellano moved toward the exit, keeping his voice low. If she accepts, she'll have access to every disciplinary record, every settlement agreement, every protected file we've spent decades keeping sealed. Can we buy her off? She just talked down an armed doctor in front of 800 witnesses. Money won't move her. A pause. Then we use the standard protocol. Find leverage. Everyone has something they want to protect. Castellano ended the call and slipped out of the ballroom just as Sarah was being surrounded by reporters who'd bypassed hotel security. He'd been managing threats to the medical establishment for 17 years, and he knew exactly how this would unfold. Sarah Mitchell thought she'd won. She thought public support and philanthropic funding would protect her. She had no idea how deeply the systems she was challenging had embedded themselves into every level of healthcare governance. But she was about to learn. Inside the ballroom, Sarah was fielding questions from 3 reporters at once, while Eleanor tried to establish some kind of perimeter. The questions came fast and aggressive. Dr. Mitchell, are you saying the entire medical hierarchy is corrupt? I'm saying systems that protect status over competence harm patients. What qualifies you to investigate an entire healthcare network? 22 years of military medical service and a decade of trauma systems research. Next question. What? Critics are already saying you're using one bad incident to push a radical agenda. Critics can review the footage and explain which part of tonight was acceptable. Sarah's patience was fraying. The security guard who assaulted me, the event director who enabled him, the doctor who mocked me, or the system that protected all of them until a live stream forced accountability. Which part should we preserve? The reporter opened his mouth, but Patricia Harlow stepped in. That's enough. Dr. Mitchell has had an extraordinarily difficult evening. We'll schedule a proper press conference for tomorrow. But as the reporters were being ushered out, one of them turned back. Dr. Mitchell, one more thing. We've received a statement from the National Medical Ethics Board. They're questioning whether your military background creates conflicts of interest in investigating civilian healthcare institutions. Do you have a response? Sarah went very still. Who issued that statement? Dr. Marcus Castellano, the board director. It went out about 10 minutes ago. Eleanor's phone buzzed. She read the message and her face darkened. Sarah, we need to talk. Privately. They found an empty conference room while hotel staff worked to clear the ballroom. Rachel followed, along with Patricia and 3 other doctors who'd become part of Sarah's impromptu coalition. Eleanor pulled up the full statement on the room's display screen. It was masterfully written. It didn't attack Sarah directly. Instead, it raised concerns about institutional understanding and civilian medical culture and appropriate oversight mechanisms. It suggested that while Dr. Mitchell's military experience was admirable, it might not translate to the complex realities of civilian healthcare systems. It recommended that any investigation be balanced with experienced healthcare administrators who understood institutional needs. It's a warning shot, Patricia said. They're telling you to back off or they'll undermine your credibility. Sarah read it again, paying attention to the specific language. They're also laying groundwork. If I accept Commonwealth's offer and start finding problems, they can claim I'm bringing military authoritarian approaches to civilian institutions. They're framing me as an outsider before I even begin. So what do you do? Rachel asked. I accept the position anyway, but I document everything. I bring in unimpeachable advisors, and I move fast before they can organize a real counterattack. Sarah looked at Eleanor. How quickly can we formalize the oversight committee? 72 hours if we push. But Sarah, you need to understand what you're up against. The National Medical Ethics Board controls licensing and accreditation. They can make life very difficult for anyone who crosses them. They can try. Eleanor's expression was grim. It's not just professional consequences. Castellano has connections to pharmaceutical companies, insurance networks, hospital investment groups. If he decides you're a threat to the entire system, he'll use every resource available to stop you. Then I'd better be worth stopping. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed a Virginia area code she didn't recognize. She answered on speaker. Dr. Mitchell, this is Colonel Andrew Hayes, U.S. Army Medical Corps. I need to speak with you about a sensitive matter. Sarah's stomach tightened. Go ahead, Colonel. I've been contacted by civilian authorities requesting your military service records, specifically any disciplinary actions, fitness evaluations, or incident reports from your deployments. They're claiming it's relevant to your qualifications for civilian healthcare oversight. The room went silent. Who requested them? Sarah asked, though she already knew. The request came through official channels but originated with the National Medical Ethics Board. Dr. Castellano's office specifically. Hayes paused. Dr. Mitchell, I need to ask you directly. Is there anything in your record that could be problematic? No, my record is clean. Are you certain? Because if there's anything, even something minor, it's better I know now. Sarah thought about Kandahar, about the incident that had ended her deployment early, about the inquiry that had cleared her but left questions. There was an investigation in 2016. A patient died during a mass casualty event. I was cleared of wrongdoing, but some people believed I prioritized the wrong patient. Hayes was quiet for a moment. How bad? Bad enough that if someone wanted to spin it, they could make it look like poor judgment under pressure. The truth is more complicated. The truth always is. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to slow walk this records request as long as legally possible. That gives you maybe 2 weeks before they get access. Use that time to control the narrative. Thank you, Colonel. Don't thank me yet. Sarah, whoever you've pissed off has serious reach if they can get official channels moving this quickly. Watch your back. The call ended. Rachel was the first to speak. What happened in Kandahar? Sarah sat down heavily. Mass casualty incident. Suicide bomber hit a market. We had 17 critical patients and 3 surgeons. I had to make triage decisions about who got immediate care and who waited. I chose to operate on a 12-year-old girl instead of a local militia leader. The girl survived. The militia leader died while waiting. She paused. Turned out the militia leader was feeding intelligence to U.S. forces. Some people thought I should have known that, should have factored it into triage decisions. That's insane, Patricia said. Triage is based on medical need, not political value. That's what the inquiry concluded, but the incident got messy. The militia leader's brother accused me of letting him die deliberately because he was Afghan. There were protests, threats. The army moved me to a different base for safety. Officially, I was cleared. Unofficially, some people still believe I made the wrong call. Eleanor's expression was troubled. Castellano will use this. He'll claim you have a history of controversial decisions, that you let personal judgment override professional protocols. Except that's not what happened. Doesn't matter. It's about perception. And right now, perception is being weaponized against you. Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, police lights still flashed in the parking structure where they'd arrested Thornwood. News vans had multiplied, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky like strange mechanical flowers. Her phone was lighting up with texts, emails, social media notifications, a digital avalanche of support, criticism, analysis, and threat. We accelerate the timeline, she said finally. Tomorrow morning, I hold a press conference accepting Commonwealth's offer. I announce the Oversight Committee members. Rachel, you're co-chair. I lay out specific reforms with measurable benchmarks, and I address the Kandahar incident directly before Castellano can weaponize it. That's risky, Eleanor warned. You'll be feeding the controversy. I'll be controlling it. There's a difference. Sarah turned back to face them. In combat medicine, you learn that bleeding out slowly is worse than bleeding fast. At least with fast bleeding, you know you have to act. Slow bleeding lets you pretend everything's fine until you collapse. This situation is going to bleed one way or another. I'd rather control the pace. Rachel pulled out her laptop. If we're doing this, we need talking points, media strategy, legal review. We have 12 hours, Sarah interrupted. Get me everything you can, but understand we're working with incomplete information and imperfect preparation. That's normal in crisis situations. You do the best you can with what you have, and you adjust in real time. For the next 6 hours, they worked. Sarah drafted her statement while Patricia reached out to medical colleagues who could vouch for the reform she was proposing. Rachel coordinated with other nurses, building a network of frontline workers willing to speak publicly about systemic problems. Eleanor worked her philanthropic connections, lining up funding commitments that would make the Oversight Committee financially independent. At 2 a.m, Sarah's phone rang again. This time, it was Kellerman. Dr. Mitchell, I have Dr. Castellano in my office. He's requesting a meeting with you. Sarah checked the time. Now? He says it's urgent. He's willing to wait. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Rachel grabbed her arm. You can't meet with him alone. This could be a setup. Probably is. Come with me. You too, Patricia. They found Castellano in Kellerman's office, looking perfectly composed despite the late hour. He was in his mid-60s with the kind of distinguished appearance that came from expensive tailoring and professional grooming. His eyes were sharp, assessing, taking in Sarah and her companions with the calculation of someone used to evaluating threats. Dr. Mitchell, thank you for making time. Dr. Castellano, what can I do for you? I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's press conference. I've seen your draft statement. He smiled slightly at her surprise. Yes, we have sources. It's quite aggressive. I'm here to offer an alternative. I'm listening. The National Medical Ethics Board is prepared to establish an independent task force to review institutional bias in healthcare. You would serve as special advisor with full access to data and meaningful input on recommendations. In exchange, you would decline Commonwealth's investigative offer and work within our established frameworks. Sarah studied him. You want me to abandon the Oversight Committee? I want you to work with institutions that have the authority and experience to implement lasting change. Your committee, while well-intentioned, would lack regulatory power. Our task force would have enforcement mechanisms. Enforcement mechanisms you control. Enforcement mechanisms that actually function within the system. Dr. Mitchell, you've had an extraordinary evening. You've exposed real problems and generated genuine momentum for reform. Don't waste it on symbolic gestures. Work with us, and we can create change that lasts. It was a good pitch, reasonable, professional, offering real power in exchange for cooperation. Sarah could see how it would play in the media, collaborative rather than confrontational, institutional rather than individual, sustainable rather than reactionary. It was also a cage. What happens to the people who participated in tonight's events? She asked. The security guard, the event director, the guests who mocked me? They've faced appropriate consequences. Marcus Webb was terminated, Christina Vale is on leave, Dr. Thornwood is facing criminal charges. And the system that enabled all of them? Castellano's smile thinned. The system is what we're discussing reforming. You're discussing managing perception of the system. There's a difference. Sarah leaned forward. Here's what I know about institutional task forces, Dr. Castellano. They're where problems go to die quietly. You'll spend 6 months gathering data, another 6 months drafting recommendations, and then those recommendations will be carefully considered by committees that have every incentive to preserve the status quo. In 3 years, you'll publish a report acknowledging that bias exists, suggesting some training programs, and calling for further study, and nothing will actually change. That's a cynical view. It's an experienced view. I've watched the military try to reform itself from within. Sometimes it works. More often, it takes external pressure and public accountability to force real change. Castellano's expression hardened. I came here hoping we could find common ground, but I see you're committed to your current path. That's unfortunate. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You're about to take on systems that have existed for decades, defended by people with far more resources and institutional knowledge than you possess. You think tonight's victory means you've won. You've barely begun to fight. He stood. When this goes badly, and it will, remember I offered you an alternative. After he left, Patricia whistled softly. Well, that was terrifying. That was him being polite, Sarah said. The real attack comes next. She was right. At 6 in the morning, 3 hours before Sarah's scheduled press conference, the first hit piece dropped. It was published by Medical Leadership Quarterly, a supposedly independent journal that was actually funded by hospital industry groups. The article, written by someone named Dr. Jeffrey Morrison, who Sarah had never heard of, was titled The Dangers of Militarizing Civilian Healthcare Reform. It was devastating. It questioned Sarah's understanding of civilian medical culture. It suggested her combat experience had created a rigid, hierarchical mindset incompatible with the collaborative nature of modern healthcare. It raised concerns about authoritarian approaches and command and control management styles. And buried in the third paragraph was a reference to Kandahar, framed as evidence of controversial decision-making that prioritized political optics over established protocols. Rachel read it aloud, her voice shaking with anger. This is character assassination. It's standard institutional defense. Sarah was scanning other news sources, watching the article get picked up and amplified. They can't attack the reforms directly because the reforms are popular, so they attack me instead. If they can make me seem unstable, authoritarian, or incompetent, they undermine everything I'm trying to accomplish. Eleanor burst into the room with her own phone. It gets worse. 3 more articles dropped in the last 20 minutes, all from different publications, all hitting the same themes, and Twitter is lighting up with physicians claiming you're attacking all doctors, undermining medical expertise, and pushing untrained nurses into positions they're not qualified for. Let me see. The tweets were coordinated, almost certainly. Different accounts, but identical phrasing, posted within minutes of each other. Dr. Mitchell's proposals would endanger patients by empowering non-physicians to override medical judgment. Nurses are valuable team members, but trauma surgery expertise doesn't qualify someone to restructure healthcare systems. Military protocols have no place in civilian medicine. This is a full-scale assault, Patricia said. Castellano must have had this ready to launch the moment you refused his offer. Sarah's phone rang. It was Colonel Hayes again. Dr. Mitchell, we have a problem. Someone leaked your Kandahar investigation file to the press. Not through official channels. This was illegal, but it's out there. How complete? Everything. The initial incident reports, witness statements, the inquiry findings. All the context is there proving you were cleared, but the headlines won't include that. They'll focus on the controversy. Sarah closed her eyes. When? The files hit Washington Post's inbox 30 minutes ago. They're verifying authenticity now, but they'll probably run with it by this afternoon. After Hayes hung up, Sarah sat in silence for a moment. The others waited, watching her process this new reality. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Boston, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed almost obscene in their beauty. Okay, Sarah said finally. New strategy. We don't wait for the press conference. We go now. What? Eleanor looked panicked. We're not ready. The talking points aren't finalized. The legal review isn't complete. And every hour we wait, they get to define the narrative without response. Rachel, get your phone. We're doing a live video statement right now. Sarah, this is crazy. This is combat. They're hitting us with everything they have while we're still organizing our defense. We either punch back immediately or we let them knock us out before we get our guard up. Sarah was already positioning chairs, checking lighting. Patricia, I need you on camera with me. Eleanor, you too. Rachel, you're filming and you're going to push this to every platform simultaneously. Rachel set up the shot while Sarah pulled out her notes and rewrote them in real time. 3 minutes later, they were ready. Sarah sat flanked by Patricia and Eleanor, with the window behind them showing Boston waking up to a new day. We're live in 3, 2, 1. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Sarah began, looking directly into the camera. Last night, I was publicly humiliated, assaulted, and nearly prevented from entering an event where I was the keynote speaker. That humiliation was live-streamed and went viral. Since then, I've been offered institutional positions, funding commitments, and reform opportunities. I've also been threatened, smeared, and subjected to a coordinated campaign to destroy my credibility. She paused, letting that land. I want to address the attacks directly. Yes, I served in the military. Yes, I made difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. Yes, there was controversy. In 2016, during a mass casualty event in Kandahar, I triaged patients according to standard medical protocols, treating the most critically injured first, regardless of their political or strategic value. A militia leader died while waiting for care. Some people believed I should have prioritized him because of his intelligence value to U.S. forces. I disagreed then, and I disagree now. Medical ethics don't change based on politics. Eleanor shifted slightly, reinforcing Sarah's presence with her own authority. The inquiry cleared me completely, Sarah continued. Every investigation concluded I followed proper protocols, but that incident is now being weaponized to suggest I'm unstable, that I make controversial decisions, that I can't be trusted with healthcare reform. Here's what I want you to understand. The people attacking me aren't worried about my judgment. They're worried about accountability. She leaned forward. Last night exposed how deeply bias is embedded in our healthcare systems. It showed how institutions protect perpetrators and how status matters more than competence. And the response from those institutions hasn't been introspection or reform. It's been attack. They're coming after me because I represent a threat to systems that have worked very well for very few people while failing everyone else. Patricia spoke next, her voice carrying the weight of decades in medicine. I'm Dr. Patricia Harlow, Chief of Staff at Riverside Medical. I've worked in healthcare administration for 32 years, and everything Dr. Mitchell is saying is true. We have created systems that protect abusers, silence victims, and prioritize institutional reputation over patient safety. I'm supporting her reform efforts because I've watched those systems damage too many people. Eleanor followed. I'm Eleanor Ashford. I've been in healthcare philanthropy for 4 decades. I've sat on hospital boards, funded medical research, and seen the inner workings of these institutions. Dr. Mitchell is facing coordinated opposition because she's threatening to expose problems that powerful people want to keep hidden. That's precisely why she's the right person to lead this reform. Sarah took control again. Here's what happens next. I'm accepting Commonwealth Health Network's offer to investigate institutional culture across their facilities. I'm establishing an oversight committee co-chaired by myself and Rachel Vance, an emergency room nurse who represents the frontline workers these systems consistently fail. We're implementing immediate transparency requirements. All findings will be published in real time, all recommendations will be public, and all resistance will be documented. She pulled out a document and held it up to the camera. This is a list of specific reforms we're implementing immediately. Mandatory bias training with testing requirements. Anonymous reporting systems with guaranteed protection for whistleblowers. Patient advocacy positions with authority to override administrative decisions when safety is at risk. Demographic audits of disciplinary actions to identify patterns of discrimination. And most importantly, consequences. Real, immediate, public consequences for anyone who obstructs this investigation or retaliates against participants. The live viewer count was climbing rapidly. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. To the National Medical Ethics Board and everyone else organizing opposition, I understand your concerns. Change is threatening, especially when you've built careers within systems that reward conformity. But understand this. I didn't start this fight. You did. The moment your security guard put his hands on me, you escalated it every time you chose institutional protection over accountability, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Sarah's voice went quiet, dangerous. I've run trauma units under rocket fire. I've made life or death decisions with incomplete information and no backup. I've stared down threats far more serious than professional retaliation and coordinated smear campaigns. You think leaking my military records will intimidate me? You think questions about my judgment will make me back down? You have no idea who you're fighting. She stood, and the camera angle shifted to follow her. This ends one of two ways. Either you participate in genuine reform, or you get exposed as the obstacle to patient safety you've always been. Either way, change is coming. The only question is whether you help build something better, or whether you go down defending something rotten. Sarah walked out of frame. The video ended. Within an hour, it had 2 million views. Within 3 hours, it was trending on every platform. News outlets were running with it, analyzing it, debating it. Medical professional organizations were being forced to respond. Hospital administrators were fielding questions from staff and patients. The conversation had shifted from whether Sarah Mitchell was qualified to whether the system she was challenging deserved to exist. But while the video went viral, and Sarah became the center of a national conversation about healthcare reform, something else was happening in conference rooms and private phone calls across the country. People with power were recognizing a genuine threat, and they were preparing to do what powerful people always did when threatened. They were going to destroy her completely. Castellano made 3 calls that afternoon. The first was to the chair of Commonwealth Health Network's board, explaining that Sarah's investigation would expose liability issues that could cost them billions in lawsuits. The second was to the insurance companies that underwrote most major hospitals, warning that transparency requirements would drive up malpractice claims. The third was to the pharmaceutical companies that funded medical research, suggesting that public accountability would slow drug development and cost lives. By evening, the pressure was building. Commonwealth's board chair called Eleanor Ashford. We need to reconsider Dr. Mitchell's appointment. Absolutely not. Eleanor, she's becoming radioactive. The ethics board is threatening to pull accreditation. Our insurance carriers are talking about raising premiums. Our pharmaceutical partners are reconsidering research grants. Let them. You don't understand the stakes. We could lose hundreds of millions in funding. Patient care could be compromised. Patient care is already compromised by the system Sarah's trying to fix. Hold the line. But the calls kept coming. Hospital administrators worried about lawsuits, doctors concerned about regulatory oversight, patients scared by suggestions that reform would mean chaos. The opposition was framing Sarah's reforms as dangerous experimentation that would hurt the very people it was supposed to help. Sarah watched it unfold from the makeshift command center they'd set up in Eleanor's foundation offices. Rachel was coordinating with nurse organizations. Patricia was rallying physician support. Eleanor was managing the philanthropic side. And Sarah was preparing for the next wave of attacks. It came at 9 p.m. A new story broke, this time from a patient advocacy blogger who'd never criticized healthcare institutions before. The post was detailed, well-researched, and devastating. It featured anonymous sources from Commonwealth Health Network claiming that Sarah's investigation was already causing chaos. Doctors were afraid to make decisions. Nurses were reporting colleagues for minor infractions. Patient care was suffering as everyone worried about being caught in Sarah's witch hunt. The post included testimonials from patients who claimed their procedures had been delayed because of the investigation. Photos of worried families, quotes from anonymous physicians saying they'd been thrown under the bus for following standard protocols. It was all fabricated. It had to be. The investigation hadn't even formally begun. But it didn't matter. The story spread like wildfire, picked up by legitimate news outlets who didn't verify sources, amplified by social media users who believed anything that confirmed their biases. Sarah's phone exploded with messages. Supporters demanding she respond, critics claiming vindication, media requesting comment. And through it all, one text message that stood out from an unknown number. "This is just the beginning. Drop the investigation or it gets worse. You have 24 hours. Rachel saw Sarah's face change as she read it. "What is it?" Sarah showed her the text. "That's a direct threat. We need to report this to police." "It won't matter. Burner phone untraceable. And reporting it just makes me look scared." Sarah put her phone down. "They're trying to break momentum, make supporters second-guess whether I'm worth defending, make institutions recalculate whether reform is worth the cost. Is it working?" Before Sarah could answer, Eleanor's assistant rushed in. "Turn on the news, Channel 7, now." They switched on the television just in time to see a press conference. Dr. Castellano stood at a podium, flanked by representatives from major medical organizations. Behind them, a banner read Coalition for Responsible Healthcare Reform. "We share Dr. Mitchell's concerns about bias in medicine," Castellano was saying. "But we cannot support an investigation that lacks proper oversight, follows no established protocols, and appears designed more to generate publicity than to implement sustainable change. Therefore, this coalition is calling for an immediate halt to Dr. Mitchell's investigation pending review by qualified healthcare policy experts." Questions from reporters. "Are you saying Dr. Mitchell isn't qualified?" "I'm saying her approach is reckless. She's using fear and public pressure to force changes that could have serious unintended consequences." "What about the incident at the hotel? Isn't that proof that bias exists?" "One incident, however regrettable, doesn't justify dismantling systems that serve millions of patients. Dr. Mitchell is exploiting a viral moment to push reforms that haven't been properly vetted." Sarah watched in silence as Castellano systematically undermined everything she'd built in the last 24 hours. He was good. He acknowledged problems while suggesting her solutions were worse. He appeared reasonable while painting her as extreme. He positioned himself as the adult in the room dealing with an impulsive activist. When the press conference ended, Sarah's phone showed 47 new messages. She ignored them all and looked at her team. "They're not trying to win the argument. They're trying to make it too expensive to keep fighting." "So what do we do?" Rachel asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Kandahar, about all the times she'd faced impossible odds, about every moment when retreat seemed smarter than advance. "We prove them wrong about everything," she said finally. "Starting tomorrow morning, we implement Phase 1 of the investigation. Full transparency, real-time reporting, public documentation of every finding. We move so fast they can't keep up with coordinated responses. And we make the case so overwhelming that opposition becomes indefensible." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've been in philanthropy long enough to recognize when I'm watching someone commit professional suicide. What you're describing will burn every bridge you have. You'll never work in civilian healthcare again. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your foundation will lose funding. And at the end of it all, you might not even succeed in changing anything." "I know. And you're doing it anyway." "I have to. Because if I back down now, I prove they were right to doubt me. I prove that institutional power always wins. I prove that people like Rachel and everyone else who spoke up last night were fools to think anything could change." Sarah met Eleanor's eyes. I can live with professional failure. I can't live with abandoning people who trusted me. Rachel stood. Then we'd better get to work. They worked through the night preparing documentation, coordinating with sources inside Commonwealth Health Network, building the infrastructure for an investigation that would start in less than 12 hours. Sarah knew they were moving too fast, cutting corners, taking risks that would normally be unacceptable. But normal was what had gotten them into this situation. Normal was what allowed bias to flourish and institutions to protect abusers. At 4 in the morning, Sarah's laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "You should see this before tomorrow." The message was from an anonymous account. The content was a single file attachment, a leaked internal memo from Commonwealth Health Network's legal department. Sarah opened it and felt her blood run cold. The memo outlined a strategy to undermine her investigation from within. It identified which staff members would cooperate and which would obstruct. It detailed plans to delay document production, restrict access to sensitive files, and create bureaucratic barriers that would slow everything to a crawl. It even named specific board members who'd privately agreed to force her removal if she became too problematic. But the most damaging section was at the end. A list of Sarah's potential vulnerabilities: her military record, her foundation's funding sources, her personal relationships, her medical license status. Each item had action items attached, plans to investigate, questions to raise, doubts to seed. "They're going to come after everything," Patricia whispered, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "Your career, your credentials, your entire life." Sarah forwarded the memo to her entire team, to Eleanor, to Rachel, to every ally she'd made in the last 24 hours. Then she composed a new message and sent it to her entire contact list, to every media outlet that had covered the story, to every organization that had expressed support. The message was simple. "They're planning to destroy me. Here's the proof. Let's see how that works out for them." Within minutes, the memo was everywhere. And Sarah Mitchell's war with the medical establishment escalated to something far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The leaked memo detonated across the internet like a tactical strike. By 5 in the morning, it was the top trending topic on every platform. News organizations that had been cautiously neutral suddenly had concrete evidence of institutional conspiracy. Medical professionals who'd been skeptical of Sarah's claims now saw documented proof that the opposition wasn't about protecting patient care. It was about protecting power. Commonwealth Health Network's PR team went into crisis mode, but the damage was catastrophic and spreading by the minute. The memo wasn't just damaging to them. It implicated the National Medical Ethics Board, 3 major hospital insurance carriers, and pharmaceutical companies that had promised to cut research funding if Sarah's investigation proceeded. The conspiracy wasn't theoretical anymore. It was documented, time-stamped, and undeniable. Sarah's phone rang at 5:30. It was the Commonwealth board chair, and his voice carried the hollow quality of someone watching their career end in real time. "Dr. Mitchell, we need to meet, immediately." "I'm listening." "Not on the phone. My office. 6 a.m. Please." Sarah arrived with Rachel and Patricia. The board chair, Thomas Whitmore, looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee no one would drink. "That memo," he said without preamble. "It was unauthorized. A rogue legal department operating beyond their mandate." "That's your position?" Sarah's tone was flat. "That's the truth. I had no knowledge of those strategies. When I offered you investigative authority, I meant it genuinely. Your legal department doesn't develop comprehensive obstruction strategies without executive knowledge. Try again." Whitmore's facade cracked. "What do you want me to say?" "Yes, there were concerns about liability exposure. Yes, some board members wanted guardrails on your investigation, but that memo, those specific tactics, I didn't authorize them." "Who did?" "Gerald Hastings, our chief counsel. He's been with Commonwealth for 23 years. He has relationships with everyone, the ethics board, the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical reps. He coordinated the opposition without consulting the full board." "Where is he now?" "Suspended pending investigation. But Dr. Mitchell, you have to understand the position this puts us in. That memo makes us look like we were planning sabotage from the beginning. Our reputation is exactly what it deserves to be, Sarah interrupted. You offered me this position knowing people in your organization would fight it. You thought you could manage the optics while containing the damage. Now you're upset because you got caught. Whitmore slumped in his chair. What do you want? Complete access. Every file, every record, every protected settlement agreement, no restrictions, no delays, no bureaucratic barriers. That would expose us to enormous liability. You exposed yourselves the moment you decided institutional protection mattered more than patient safety. Now you get to choose, cooperate fully and rebuild credibility through transparency, or obstruct and prove every criticism of you is correct. Patricia leaned forward. Thomas, I've known you for 15 years. You're not a bad person, but you've been part of a bad system for so long you can't see how corrupted it's become. This is your chance to be on the right side. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a key card and an authorization document. This gives you access to our secure archives. Every disciplinary record, every complaint, every settlement. It's all there. He signed the authorization with a pen that seemed too heavy for his hand. I'm also removing all administrative barriers to your investigation. You report directly to me, and I report to the full board weekly with complete transparency. Sarah took the key card. What changed your mind? My daughter is a nurse at County General. She called me at 4 this morning after seeing that memo. She asked me if I knew how many times she'd been harassed, belittled, and ignored by doctors who thought her observations didn't matter. She asked if I cared more about protecting the system than protecting her. His voice broke slightly. I didn't have a good answer. By 7 a.m., Sarah's team had set up in Commonwealth's archive facility. The space was vast, rows of file cabinets, digital servers, and storage boxes containing decades of institutional memory. Rachel stood in the center of it and whistled. This is going to take months. We don't have months. We have days before the opposition regroups. Sarah pulled out her laptop and started mapping search parameters. We're not doing a comprehensive review. We're looking for patterns. Repeat offenders, systemic cover-ups, cases where institutions chose protection over accountability. They divided responsibilities. Rachel focused on nursing complaints and disciplinary actions. Patricia examined physician conduct records. Sarah dug into settlement agreements and legal files. They worked in focused silence, broken only by occasional discoveries that made someone curse or gasp. 3 hours in, Rachel found the first major pattern. Sarah, look at this. Dr. Robert Kraus, cardiac surgeon. 17 complaints over 9 years from nurses reporting verbal abuse, inappropriate conduct, and retaliation. Every single complaint was dismissed as personality conflict or communication style differences. He's still operating. Sarah cross-referenced the name with settlement records. Because Commonwealth settled 3 malpractice suits involving his patients quietly, combined payout of $4 million, all with non-disclosure agreements. Patricia pulled up his current status. He's chief of cardiothoracic surgery. He sits on the credentials committee that approves new hires. Screenshot everything. This goes in the first public report. By noon, they had identified 12 similar cases. Physicians with documented patterns of abuse, discrimination, or negligence who'd been protected through settlements, quiet transfers, or administrative cover-ups. The institutional cost of protecting these individuals was staggering. Over $30 million in settlements, countless staff departures, and patient outcomes that ranged from substandard to fatal. But the real revelation came when Sarah started cross-referencing names with external databases. Dr. Kraus wasn't just protected by Commonwealth. He appeared in complaint records at 3 other hospital systems where he'd worked previously. Same pattern every time. Complaints, settlements, transfers. And sitting on the credentials committee that approved his hire at Commonwealth had been Dr. Marcus Castellano, before he'd moved to the National Medical Ethics Board. Sarah sat back, pieces clicking into place. It's not just about protecting individuals. It's a network. They move problem physicians between institutions, each system assuming someone else did proper vetting. No one wants to formally discipline them because that creates liability exposure and admission of prior knowledge. So they just shuffle them around. Rachel looked sick. How many? Sarah ran the query across all their data. The results made the room go silent. 43 physicians with documented patterns of serious misconduct, currently practicing across Commonwealth's 17 facilities. Combined, they've generated over $200 million in settlements and legal costs, and that's just Commonwealth. If this pattern exists across other major health systems, it does, Patricia said quietly. She'd pulled up her own hospital's records on her personal laptop. We have at least 9. I knew some of them had issues, but I didn't realize how extensive the documentation was, or how deliberately it had been buried. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Dr. Mitchell? This is Jennifer Torres, investigative reporter with the Boston Herald. I've been following your story since last night. I need to ask you about something that just hit my desk. Go ahead. I received an anonymous package 30 minutes ago. It contains financial records showing the National Medical Ethics Board has received over $12 million in the last 5 years from hospital industry groups, pharmaceutical companies, and medical malpractice insurance carriers. The same companies that are publicly opposing your investigation. Sarah's pulse quickened. Can you verify the records? Already did. They're legitimate. Bank transfers, tax filings, the whole paper trail. Dr. Castellano sits on the board of a consulting firm that's paid by these companies to advise on regulatory policy. He's personally received over $800,000 in the last 3 years. Are you running with this? Within the hour. But I wanted to give you a chance to comment first. Did you know about this connection? I suspected institutional capture, but I didn't have proof. Thank you for verifying it. After Torres hung up, Sarah looked at her team. It's all connected. The ethics board isn't an oversight organization. It's a protection racket. They take money from the industries they're supposed to regulate, and in exchange, they make sure regulation never threatens profits. Eleanor called at 1 p.m. Have you seen the Herald article? I just contributed to it. It drops in 30 minutes. Good, because CNN wants you for a live interview at 3. So does MSNBC, Fox, and about 20 other outlets. The memo leak broke them open. Now they all want the full story. Set them up, all of them. I want maximum visibility when we release our first findings. The Herald article detonated the conspiracy further. Within an hour, other journalists were digging into ethics board finances, finding more connections, more conflicts of interest. A pattern emerged of regulatory capture so extensive it effectively made oversight impossible. The people supposed to protect patients were being paid by the institutions harming them. Castellano tried to control the damage with a statement claiming the consulting work was separate from his ethics board duties and represented legitimate policy expertise. But his explanation only drew more attention to the conflicts. By 2 p.m., 3 members of the ethics board had resigned. By 2:30, calls were growing for Castellano's removal. Sarah's 3 o'clock CNN interview was watched by 4 million people live. She sat across from veteran anchor David Brennan, who'd covered healthcare policy for 2 decades and looked genuinely shaken by the revelations. Dr. Mitchell, let me make sure I understand what you're alleging. The National Medical Ethics Board, which controls physician licensing and hospital accreditation, has been financially compromised by the very industries it regulates? I'm not alleging anything. The financial records are public now. You can verify them yourself. But what does this mean practically? It means that when hospitals wanted to protect physicians with documented abuse patterns, the ethics board helped make that possible. It means that when institutions chose settlements over transparency, the regulatory body that should have intervened was financially incentivized to look the other way. It means the system designed to protect patients was actually protecting profits. That's an extraordinary claim. Look at the data. 43 physicians with serious documented misconduct, still practicing, moved between institutions without proper oversight. $200 million in settlements that should have triggered investigations but didn't. An ethics board director who received $800,000 from the companies he was supposed to regulate. Sarah leaned forward. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented fact. What do you want to see happen? Complete restructuring of medical oversight. Independent regulatory bodies with no financial ties to healthcare industries. Mandatory public reporting of disciplinary actions. Criminal penalties for institutions that knowingly transfer problem physicians without disclosure. And most importantly, power for frontline healthcare workers. nurses, technicians, patient advocates, to report concerns without fear of retaliation. The interview went viral immediately. But more importantly, it triggered a cascade of similar revelations from other hospital systems. Journalists who'd been sitting on stories about institutional misconduct suddenly had permission to run them. The dam had broken. By evening, 3 more major hospital networks had suspended executives pending investigation. 7 physicians had been placed on administrative leave. 2 state medical boards had announced emergency reviews of licensing procedures. And the pressure on Castellano had become unsustainable. He called Sarah directly at 6 p.m. "You've won. Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I wanted to hear that patient safety matters more than institutional reputation. But sure, we can start with surrender. I'm resigning from the ethics board, effective immediately." "Good. That's a start." "A start? Dr. Mitchell, I've just ended my career. Everything I built for 2 decades is gone. My reputation is destroyed. I'll probably face criminal investigation. What more do you want?" Sarah's voice was ice. "I want you to understand that every day you spent protecting abusive physicians and corrupt institutions, people suffered. Nurses were harassed out of careers they loved. Patients received substandard care from doctors who should have lost their licenses. Families lost people they loved because systems chose profit over safety. Your career ending doesn't balance that scale. It's just the minimum consequence for the damage you caused." Castellano was quiet for a long moment. "Do you ever stop to consider that you might be wrong? That maybe these systems exist for good reasons? That oversight and regulation are more complicated than you make them sound?" "Every single day. That's why I document everything, why I build teams instead of operating alone, why I welcome scrutiny of my methods. But here's the difference between us. When I'm wrong, people tell me. They push back. They demand better. Your system silenced everyone who tried to tell you that you were wrong. That's not complexity, that's corruption." The call ended. At 8 p.m., Sarah held a press conference in Eleanor's foundation offices. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and representatives from medical organizations trying to get ahead of the scandal. Rachel stood beside her, along with Patricia and 4 other healthcare workers who'd agreed to speak publicly about institutional failures. Sarah began with the data. She presented findings from Commonwealth's archives, anonymized to protect patients but specific enough to show patterns. She named physicians who'd been protected, documented their misconduct, showed the cost in settlements and suffering. She traced financial connections between regulatory bodies and the industries they supposedly oversaw. She laid out a comprehensive picture of systemic failure. Then she invited the other healthcare workers to share their experiences. A respiratory therapist described watching a physician ignore her warnings about a ventilator setting, resulting in a patient death, and then being blamed for not escalating more forcefully, even though protocol required her to defer to physician judgment. A patient advocate detailed how families were routinely lied to about medical errors, offered settlements in exchange for silence, and threatened with expensive litigation if they pursued accountability. An emergency room physician talked about reporting a colleague for working shifts while impaired, only to be told by administrators that formal action would hurt the department's reputation and that he should handle it informally. Story after story. Each one documented, each one representing a system that consistently chose protection over accountability. When they finished, reporters erupted with questions. "Dr. Mitchell, what's your response to critics who say you're destroying trust in healthcare?" Trust destroyed by honesty wasn't real trust. It was compliance enforced by information asymmetry. Aren't you worried about driving good doctors out of medicine? Good doctors welcome accountability. The only people who should be worried are the ones who've been protected by its absence. What happens next? We expand the investigation. Today was Commonwealth Health Network. Tomorrow, we're opening similar reviews at 7 other major hospital systems that have volunteered for examination. We're building a public database of disciplinary actions so patients can make informed choices. And we're working with legislators on bills that would make institutional cover-ups criminal offenses. A reporter in the back called out, "Dr. Mitchell, there are rumors that pharmaceutical companies are threatening to pull research funding from any institution that cooperates with your investigation. How do you respond to economic pressure?" Sarah smiled, and it was not a warm expression. "Let them pull funding. Every dollar they withdraw proves they value control over innovation. We'll find other funding sources, but they should understand something clearly. Threatening economic retaliation against patient safety reforms is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people demand stronger regulation. They're not scaring us, they're proving our point. The press conference ended at 9:30. Sarah's team reconvened in Eleanor's office, exhausted but energized. 7 hospital systems want reviews, Rachel said, scrolling through emails, plus 3 state medical boards requesting consultation on licensing reform, plus about 40 individual physicians asking how to report institutional misconduct safely. Patricia was reading news coverage on her tablet. CNN is calling this the largest healthcare scandal in decades. They're comparing it to the opioid crisis in terms of institutional complicity. Eleanor set down her phone. I just got off with Senator Patricia Huang from the Healthcare Oversight Committee. She wants you to testify before Congress about regulatory reform. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it. 24 hours ago, she'd been defending herself against coordinated attacks. Now she was being asked to reshape national healthcare policy. The scale was overwhelming. I need 12 hours of sleep and a meal that isn't coffee, she said. Then we plan next steps. But as the team was packing up, Sarah's laptop chimed with a new email. The sender was anonymous, the subject line empty. She almost deleted it as spam, but something made her open it. Inside was a single attached file, a video recording time-stamped from 2 years earlier. The thumbnail showed the interior of what looked like a hospital conference room. Sarah clicked play. The video showed Castellano sitting across from a hospital CEO Sarah didn't recognize. Their conversation was clearly being recorded without their knowledge. The angle suggested a hidden camera. We can't afford another scandal, the CEO was saying. If Mitchell's investigation proceeds, it'll expose the transfer agreements. Every institution that participated will face liability. Then we make sure the investigation doesn't proceed, Castellano replied. We attack her credibility, question her motives, make cooperation with her toxic for any serious healthcare organization. And if that doesn't work? Castellano's expression was cold. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Military records that can be reframed, personal relationships that can be weaponized, financial dependencies that can be pressured. We find her breaking point and we push until she breaks. The CEO leaned back. You're talking about destroying someone's life over an investigation. I'm talking about protecting a system that serves millions of patients. Sometimes individual casualties are necessary for the greater good. The video ended. Sarah sat frozen, staring at the screen. This wasn't just evidence of opposition to her investigation. This was premeditated conspiracy to destroy her personally, recorded 2 years before the hotel incident even happened. Castellano had been planning this kind of defense for years, ready to deploy it against anyone who threatened institutional power. She forwarded the video to her entire team, to every journalist she'd spoken with, to law enforcement, to congressional oversight committees. Then she called an emergency meeting. Rachel arrived within 20 minutes, followed by Patricia and Eleanor. They watched the video in silence. This changes everything, Patricia said finally. This isn't reactive defense. This is systematic suppression of oversight. Eleanor was already on her phone. I'm sending this to Senator Huang. This is evidence of criminal conspiracy. Castellano isn't just resigning from the ethics board. He's going to prison. But Sarah was thinking about something else. Who sent this to me? And why now? Does it matter? Rachel asked. It might. Someone had access to this recording for 2 years and chose to release it now at the exact moment it would cause maximum damage to Castellano. That's not coincidence. Her laptop chimed again. Another anonymous email. This one contained a message. There are 12 more recordings. Each one documents institutional conspiracies to suppress oversight, intimidate whistleblowers, and protect misconduct. I've been collecting evidence for 5 years, waiting for someone who could actually use it effectively. You've proven you can. The rest will come in time. But you should know, the conspiracy goes deeper than Castellano. He was middle management. The people who built this system are still in power, and they're planning their next move. Watch your back. A friend you haven't met yet. Sarah read the message aloud. The room went quiet. What does that mean? Rachel asked. Middle management? Who's above Castellano? I don't know, but someone does. And they just made us part of something much bigger than reforming one hospital system. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at Boston's nighttime skyline. Sarah, you need to decide how deep you want to go. Right now, you've exposed institutional failures and corrupt oversight. That's historic. But if this message is accurate, if there's a higher level coordinating all of this, then we're not fighting individual bad actors. We're fighting organized systematic corruption at the national level. Exactly. And that kind of fight doesn't end with reforms and resignations. It ends with people in prison or people dead, sometimes both. Sarah thought about the security guard's hand on her shoulder, about standing outside the hotel being told she didn't belong. She thought about Rachel sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. She thought about every nurse who'd been silenced, every patient who'd suffered, every family that had lost someone because institutions chose protection over accountability. How deep does it go? She asked quietly. Eleanor turned from the window. Based on what we've found, insurance companies, pharmaceutical firms, hospital investment groups, medical device manufacturers, and the politicians they fund, we're talking about billions of dollars in annual revenue protected by regulatory capture. If someone coordinated that systematically, they'd have more power than most government agencies. Then we find them, we document them, and we expose them. Sarah, I know the risks. I know what I'm asking everyone to take on. If you want out, I understand. No judgment. But I didn't start this fight to stop halfway. Patricia spoke up. I'm in. My career was already over the moment I sided with you publicly. Might as well make it count. Rachel nodded. Same. I've spent 6 years watching this system destroy good people. If there's a chance to actually fix it, I'm not walking away. Eleanor sighed. My foundation has over $100 million in assets. Most of it comes from healthcare industry donations. If I go after their power structure directly, I'll lose all of it. I know. Which is why I'm liquidating those assets tomorrow and moving everything into an independent trust dedicated to healthcare transparency. They can't threaten funding they don't control. She smiled grimly. I'm 73 years old. I've spent 40 years playing nice with these people. Let's see what happens when I stop. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it, expecting another threat. Instead, it was a photo of a file folder labeled Project Safeguard, Confidential Board Materials. The accompanying message read, Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., public garden bench facing the swan boats. Come alone. Bring no devices. I have everything you need to take them down completely. But the window is closing fast. They know about the recordings now. They're preparing their endgame. We have 72 hours to strike first, or this opportunity disappears forever. Sarah showed the message to her team. Eleanor read it and went pale. This is either the break we need, or a trap designed to eliminate you. Probably both. Only one way to find out. Sarah, you can't seriously be considering, I have to. If someone really has evidence that can expose the full conspiracy, we need it. And if it's a trap, better me than someone without combat training. Rachel grabbed her arm. Then I'm coming with you. The message said alone. I don't care what the message said. I'm not letting you walk into a potential ambush without backup. They argued for another 20 minutes, but Sarah knew Rachel was right. Going alone was tactically stupid, and tactics mattered more than instructions from anonymous sources. At 5:30 the next morning, Sarah and Rachel approached the public garden from different directions, phones powered down and left in Eleanor's office as instructed. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Early morning joggers circled the paths. A few homeless people slept on benches. Everything looked perfectly normal. Sarah sat on the specified bench. Rachel positioned herself 30 yards away, pretending to stretch before a run, but keeping Sarah in her peripheral vision. At exactly 6 a.m., a woman in her mid-50s sat down beside Sarah. She was dressed in business casual, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. Her face was unremarkable except for her eyes, which carried the particular wariness of someone who'd seen institutional machinery up close and survived. Dr. Mitchell, thank you for coming. Who are you? My name is Helen Reeves. Until yesterday, I was Executive Director of Compliance at the American Hospital Alliance. I've been documenting systemic corruption for 5 years, and I'm about to give you everything I have. But first, you need to understand what you're actually fighting." She opened the briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. "This is Project Safeguard. It started 8 years ago as a defensive strategy developed by the largest hospital systems, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical firms. Their goal was simple: ensure that healthcare regulation never threatened profitability. They did this by capturing regulatory agencies, coordinating legal strategies, and systematically removing anyone who posed a threat to the system. How? However necessary. Character assassination for most, financial pressure for some, legal threats for others, and in a few cases," she paused, "accidents arranged for people who couldn't be controlled any other way." Sarah's blood ran cold. "You're talking about murder. I'm talking about 18 suspicious deaths over 8 years. Whistleblowers, journalists, investigators. All ruled accidents or suicides, all occurring just before they were about to expose major institutional corruption. I have the files." She handed Sarah the folder. Inside were names, dates, circumstances of death, and evidence suggesting each case deserved reinvestigation. Sarah recognized 3 of the names, people whose stories she'd followed, whose deaths had seemed convenient but never proven suspicious. "Why give this to me now?" "Because you're the first person with enough public visibility and institutional independence to use it effectively. Everyone else who got close either got bought off or buried. You can't be bought, and you're too visible to bury quietly. That makes you our best chance." "Our?" "There are 17 of us. Compliance officers, internal auditors, hospital administrators, insurance investigators. We've all seen pieces of the conspiracy. We've been quietly collecting evidence and waiting for the right moment. You created that moment." Helen pulled out a USB drive and pressed it into Sarah's hand. "This contains everything. Financial records, meeting transcripts, emails, recordings, 8 years of documentation proving systematic coordination between hospitals, insurers, pharmaceutical companies, and regulatory agencies to suppress oversight and eliminate threats. It's enough to send dozens of people to prison and dismantle the power structure that's been running healthcare for decades." "What happens to you when I release this?" "I disappear. I've already arranged it. New identity, new city, new life. The others are doing the same. We can't stay visible once this goes public. They'll claim the evidence is fabricated. They'll try. But we have originals, timestamps, blockchain verification for digital files, and corroborating testimony from multiple independent sources. This isn't just documents, it's an airtight case." Sarah closed her fist around the drive. "How much time do I have?" 72 hours before they realize I've turned. After that, they'll activate emergency protocols, destroy evidence, scatter assets, activate legal defenses we've spent years preparing to counter. You need to release everything simultaneously to media, law enforcement, and congressional oversight before they can respond." "What emergency protocols?" Helen's expression went dark. "The kind that make inconvenient problems disappear permanently. Dr. Mitchell, these people have billions of dollars at stake and no ethical limits on how they protect it. They've already tried to destroy your career. If that doesn't work, they'll escalate. You need to understand what you're walking into." "I understand." "I don't think you do, but you're going to find out very soon." Helen stood, leaving the briefcase on the bench. "Everything you need is in there. Use it well. And Dr. Mitchell, watch your back. They already know about this meeting. The clock just started." She walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd before Sarah could ask what she meant about them knowing. Sarah grabbed the briefcase and signaled Rachel. They moved quickly through the public garden, heading back to Eleanor's office. But as they reached the exit onto Charles Street, Sarah saw something that made her stop cold. Across the street, partially hidden by a parked van, was the same black town car that had delivered James Kellerman to the hotel 2 nights ago. And standing beside it, watching Sarah with the cold calculation of someone waiting for the right moment to strike, was a man she'd never seen before. He smiled at her. Then he pulled out his phone, made a brief call, and got into the car. Sarah and Rachel ran. They didn't stop running until they reached Eleanor's building 3 blocks away. Sarah's combat instincts were screaming. Being watched meant being tracked, and being tracked meant they had minutes, not hours, before the situation escalated. She clutched the briefcase against her chest as they burst through the lobby doors. Eleanor took one look at their faces and started making calls. Building security, lock all entrances, no one in or out without my personal authorization. Patricia was already setting up laptops. What did you get? Sarah dumped the briefcase contents onto the conference table. Files, USB drives, photographs, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Release everything simultaneously or they'll bury it piecemeal. You have one shot. Make it count." Rachel plugged in the first USB drive while Sarah speed-dialed Jennifer Torres at the Herald. "I need you to stand by for the biggest story of your career. I'm sending files in 30 minutes. You'll need your entire investigative team ready to verify and publish immediately." "What kind of files?" "Evidence of systematic conspiracy to suppress healthcare oversight, 8 years of documentation, financial crimes, regulatory capture, possible homicides. Can you handle it?" Torres's voice went sharp and focused. "Send me everything. We'll have it verified and published within 2 hours." Sarah made identical calls to the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and 3 congressional oversight committees. Each conversation was brief, urgent, and met with the same response. "Send it now. We'll verify fast. We'll publish immediately." But as Patricia began copying files to send, the building's fire alarm erupted. Eleanor checked her security feed and went pale. "That's not a drill. Someone pulled the alarm on the 3rd floor. Building protocol requires full evacuation." "It's them," Sarah said. "They're forcing us out of a secure location." Rachel was still downloading files from the USB drives. "We need 5 more minutes to get everything copied." "We don't have 5 minutes." Sarah could hear evacuation announcements echoing through the building. "Patricia, grab what you can. Rachel, take those drives. Eleanor, we need another secure location with internet access." "My house in Cambridge, 20 minutes from here." They moved fast, stuffing laptops and drives into bags, while building security pounded on the door, demanding they evacuate. Sarah opened the door to find 3 security guards, all of whom she recognized from the hotel incident aftermath. Good people, not part of the conspiracy. "Dr. Mitchell, we have to clear the building." "I know, give us 60 seconds. Fire department protocol. 60 seconds, please." Something in her voice made them nod and step back. Sarah's team grabbed the last files and moved toward the emergency stairs, but as they descended, Sarah heard footsteps coming up fast, too purposeful. "Back up," she commanded. They reversed direction, climbing toward the roof access. Behind them, the footsteps accelerated. They burst onto the roof into cold morning air. The door slammed behind them, and Sarah immediately jammed the emergency bar with a piece of pipe she found near the HVAC units. It wouldn't hold long, but it might buy them minutes. Eleanor was already on her phone. "I'm calling for helicopter evacuation. My foundation has emergency transport contracts." "No time," Sarah interrupted. She was scanning the roof, finding exits, calculating distances. The adjacent building was 12 feet away across an alley. Below, 6 stories of empty air. Rachel followed her gaze. "You cannot be serious." "We jump or we lose everything. Your choice." Patricia looked at the gap and laughed, but it was the desperate sound of someone realizing normal life had ended the moment they chose truth over comfort. "I haven't jumped anything since college track." "This is insane." The roof access door shook as someone rammed it from the other side. "Now or never," Sarah said. She backed up, took a running start, and launched herself across the gap. For a moment, she was airborne, briefcase clutched tight, wind rushing past. Then she hit the adjacent roof, rolled to absorb impact, came up running. Rachel jumped next, clearing the gap with room to spare. Then Patricia, who stumbled on landing but didn't fall. Eleanor was last. 73 years old, wearing business heels, carrying a laptop bag. She kicked off her shoes, took a breath, and jumped. She made it by inches. Behind them, the roof access door finally gave way. 3 men emerged, but they weren't building security. They were professional, tactical gear, communication earpieces, moving with the coordination that came from military or private security training. Sarah's group was already at the next building's stairwell, descending fast. They emerged into an office complex mid-morning chaos. Workers arriving, coffee being brewed, normal life continuing while 6 floors above them, people were trying to stop the exposure of the largest healthcare conspiracy in decades. Eleanor led them through service corridors and into the parking garage where her driver waited with her personal car. They were moving before the tactical team could reach ground level. Your house is compromised, Sarah said as they accelerated into Cambridge traffic. They know your address. We need somewhere they won't look. Rachel pulled out her phone. I know a place. My brother's apartment in Somerville. He's deployed overseas, no connection to any of us. 20 minutes later, they were setting up in a cramped two-bedroom apartment that smelled like old pizza in desperation. But it had internet, it had locks, and it wasn't on anyone's radar. Patricia finished uploading the files to cloud storage while Sarah coordinated release timing with journalists. Everyone publishes at noon exactly. That's 90 minutes from now, simultaneous across all platforms so they can't suppress any single outlet. Eleanor was reading through the files on her laptop, and her expression grew darker with each page. Sarah, this is worse than we thought. Project Safeguard wasn't just defensive. They actively targeted people. Look at this memo from 6 years ago. She turned the screen around. The memo, signed by someone named Vincent Cross with the title of Strategic Coordinator, outlined specific strategies for eliminating threats to the healthcare profit structure. It listed names, journalists, investigators, whistleblowers, and next to each name was a status, neutralized, ongoing, or pending. Who's Vincent Cross? Rachel asked. Sarah was already searching. She found him in 3 seconds. Former pharmaceutical executive, now running a consulting firm that advised hospital systems and insurance companies on strategic risk management. His client list read like a directory of every major healthcare institution in America. He's the architect, Sarah said quietly. The one Helen mentioned. The person coordinating everything. She kept reading and found something that made her blood freeze. Her own name appeared on a recent memo, dated 3 days before the hotel incident. Status, pending. Strategy, public humiliation, credential attack, military record weaponization, backup plan, permanent removal if primary strategies fail. They planned all of it, Patricia whispered. The security guard, Christina's response, even Thornwood's breakdown. It was all orchestrated to destroy you. Not orchestrated, Sarah corrected. They created conditions and let institutional bias do the work. They knew security would assume I didn't belong. They knew management would back their staff over a random woman in a simple dress. They weaponized existing prejudices. Rachel was reading another file. Sarah, look at the timeline. 3 weeks before the hotel incident, Vincent Cross's firm received a consulting contract from Commonwealth Health Network. The project description says reputation management and regulatory threat mitigation. Eleanor connected the dots. They knew you were scheduled as keynote speaker. They knew your foundation had funded the initiative. They deliberately created a situation where you'd be humiliated, then use that humiliation to justify attacking your credibility. Except it backfired, Patricia said, because they didn't account for the live stream, or for Sarah refusing to back down, or for people actually caring about institutional bias. Sarah checked the time, 1 hour until synchronized release. Her phone was buzzing continuously with messages from reporters finalizing details, congressional staffers preparing for hearings, and law enforcement agencies requesting copies of evidence. But one call came through that wasn't expected. The caller ID showed unknown, encrypted. Sarah answered cautiously. Yes? Dr. Mitchell, my name is Agent Rebecca Moss, FBI, Public Corruption Unit. We've been investigating healthcare industry corruption for 18 months. We just received copies of the files you're about to release publicly. I need to speak with you immediately about protective custody. I'm not interested in hiding. This isn't about hiding. This is about keeping you alive long enough to testify. The people you're exposing have demonstrated willingness to eliminate threats. We have evidence suggesting at least 3 previous attempts on potential witnesses. If I go into protective custody, they win. The story becomes about me being scared instead of about what they did. If you're dead, there's no story at all. Sarah considered this. What are you offering? Close protection team, secure testimony at congressional hearings, witness protection after, if needed. We fast-track federal charges based on your evidence and build a case that doesn't depend solely on you staying alive. I want Rachel Vance, Patricia Harlow, and Eleanor Ashford included in protection. Done. Where are you now? Sarah gave her the address. Moss said they'd arrive within 30 minutes. The files went live at noon exactly. Sarah watched it happen across multiple screens, simultaneous publication by every major news outlet, trending on every social media platform, picked up by international press within minutes. The scope was staggering. Financial crimes totaling billions. Regulatory capture documented across 17 federal and state agencies. Evidence of systematic witness intimidation. And the 18 suspicious deaths, each one now flagged for reinvestigation. Within the first hour, 3 hospital CEOs resigned. Within 2 hours, the SEC announced emergency investigations into 5 major healthcare corporations. Within 3 hours, the National Medical Ethics Board was dissolved by emergency legislative action, and Vincent Cross was arrested at his office in Manhattan, led out in handcuffs while cameras captured every moment. Sarah watched his arrest on CNN. He looked smaller than she'd imagined, ordinary, like someone you'd pass on the street without noticing. But as federal agents guided him toward their vehicle, he looked directly at the camera and smiled. It was the smile of someone who'd planned for this contingency, who had lawyers and resources and connections that would make prosecution difficult. Agent Moss arrived with her protection team as promised. They were professional, efficient, and made it clear this wasn't optional. "We have credible intelligence suggesting immediate threats against all 4 of you. You're coming with us." They were relocated to a secure federal facility outside Boston. For the next 72 hours, Sarah lived in a world of debriefings, legal consultations, and testimony preparation. She watched the fallout unfold through news coverage and FBI briefings. The arrests came in waves. Hospital executives, insurance company officers, pharmaceutical executives, regulatory officials. 43 people in the first week, another 67 in the second. Each arrest triggering new investigations, new revelations, new conspirators turning on each other to minimize their sentences. Dr. Castellano was arrested on day 4. The charges included fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and as a special edition based on newly discovered evidence, accessory to the murder of a whistleblower who'd died in a suspicious car accident 3 years earlier. His bail was denied. His legal team's confident dismissals turned to desperate plea bargaining within days. On day 9, Sarah testified before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. The hearing room was packed, cameras broadcasting live to millions of viewers. Senator Patricia Huang led the questioning. "Dr. Mitchell, in your professional opinion, how widespread is the corruption you've documented?" "Systematic and pervasive. It exists at every level from individual hospitals to national regulatory agencies. The evidence shows decades of coordinated effort to prioritize profit over patient safety." "What reforms do you recommend?" Sarah pulled out the comprehensive proposal her team had developed. Complete restructuring of healthcare oversight with independent agencies funded by public money, not industry contributions. Mandatory public reporting of all disciplinary actions against medical professionals. Federal protection for healthcare whistleblowers with criminal penalties for retaliation. Patient advocate positions in every hospital with authority to override administrative decisions when safety is at risk. And most critically, power sharing with frontline healthcare workers in policy decisions. A senator from the opposition party leaned forward. "Dr. Mitchell, critics say your proposals would create chaos in an already strained healthcare system. How do you respond?" "The system is already in chaos. We've just been hiding it with institutional silence and legal settlements. What I'm proposing is accountability. If accountability creates chaos, that tells you how broken the system was to begin with." Another senator spoke up. "What gives you the authority to recommend such sweeping changes?" Sarah met his eyes. 22 years of military medical service, a decade of trauma systems research, and the fact that when I stood outside a hotel being told I didn't belong, I had the evidence and the courage to prove everyone wrong. That's my authority. Question it if you want, but you can't ignore what I've documented. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, 12 senators had committed to co-sponsoring comprehensive reform legislation. The others were calculating political costs and trying to find safe positions that wouldn't anger voters who were demanding change. 3 weeks after the files went public, Sarah stood in the ballroom of the Ocean View Grand Hotel for the first time since that October night. The space had been transformed. No gala decorations, no wealthy donors and designer clothes. Instead, it was filled with nurses, hospital technicians, patient advocates, and healthcare workers who'd spent careers being told they didn't matter. The event was billed as the first Healthcare Worker Empowerment Summit, and Rachel had organized every detail. She stood at the podium now, calling the room to order. 3 weeks ago, most of you watched a live stream of Dr. Sarah Mitchell being humiliated at this hotel's entrance. You saw security assault her, you saw management dismiss her, you saw wealthy guests mock her, and you saw her refuse to accept treatment that healthcare workers face every single day. The room erupted in applause. Since then, 43 physicians with documented abuse patterns have lost their licenses. 18 hospital executives have been fired. 7 regulatory officials are facing criminal charges. And most importantly, we've forced a national conversation about who has power in healthcare and how that power gets used. More applause, louder this time. But we're not here to celebrate victory. We're here to begin the real work of building something better. Dr. Mitchell exposed corruption. Now we have to replace it with systems that actually serve patients and respect the people who care for them. Rachel gestured towards Sarah, who stood and walked to the podium. The ovation was thunderous. It went on for 3 full minutes before Sarah could speak. Thank you, but I want to be clear about something. I didn't do this alone, and I'm not the hero of this story. The heroes are people like Rachel, who work 12-hour shifts and still find energy to fight for change. The heroes are the nurses who reported abuse and got fired for it. The heroes are the patients who demanded accountability and got silenced with settlements. The heroes are everyone who kept pushing for something better even when the system told them to shut up and accept things as they are. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 3 weeks ago, I stood outside this building and a security guard put his hands on me because he assumed I didn't belong. He was wrong about me specifically, but he was right about the system. I didn't belong in a system that values status over competence, that protects abusers over victims, that chooses institutional reputation over patient safety. None of us belong in that system. Sarah pulled out her phone and displayed an image on the screens around the room, the moment from the live stream when Marcus Webb had shoved her shoulder. This moment went viral because it was visceral and visible. But this moment happens every day to people who don't have cameras documenting it. It happens in operating rooms where nurses' observations get dismissed. It happens in examination rooms where patients' concerns get ignored. It happens in administrative meetings where frontline workers get excluded from decisions that affect them directly. She advanced to the next image, her keynote speech, standing at this same podium. That night, I talked about bias under pressure. But the real lesson wasn't about pressure. It was about transparency. The only reason anything changed was because Melissa Torres live-streamed the whole thing. The only reason we exposed the conspiracy was because whistleblowers documented everything. The only reason reform is happening is because we made it impossible to hide. Sarah looked directly at the audience. So here's what we're building. The Healthcare Transparency Alliance, a national organization dedicated to documenting institutional failures, protecting whistleblowers, and advocating for frontline workers. Rachel is the executive director. We have funding from Eleanor Ashford's foundation and 23 other philanthropic organizations that have committed to supporting accountability over access. And we have a simple mission: make every healthcare institution in America operate like someone's watching, because someone will be. The applause was deafening, but Sarah raised her hand for quiet. I want to talk about the people who tried to stop us, not to gloat, but to learn. Vincent Cross and his network thought they could destroy me by weaponizing bias and institutional protection. They thought if they made me look unstable or unqualified, no one would listen to my evidence. They thought institutional power would always defeat individual courage. She paused. They were wrong. But they were almost right. If I'd been alone, they would have won. If I hadn't had Rachel, Patricia, Eleanor, and hundreds of other people standing with me, they would have buried everything. The lesson isn't that one person can change a system. The lesson is that systems change when enough people decide they're done accepting things as they are. Sarah pulled up one final image. A photograph taken that morning showing the front entrance of the Ocean View Grand. The same platinum doors where she'd been stopped. But now, mounted beside them, was a plaque reading, "Healthcare Worker Entrance, All Professionals Welcome." Thomas Whitmore installed that this morning. He didn't have to. Commonwealth Health Network is already facing enough scrutiny. But he did it because he understood that symbols matter. Changing who gets to use which entrance won't fix healthcare corruption. But it's a start. It's a visible commitment that things will be different. The room was completely silent now, everyone leaning forward. I was humiliated outside this building because someone decided I didn't look important enough to matter. That humiliation became a catalyst for exposing systematic corruption. But I want you to understand something clearly. The humiliation was never the point. The point was what we did with it. We could have accepted private apologies and quiet reforms. We could have taken the money and the positions and let things go back to normal. Instead, we chose transparency. We chose accountability. We chose to make noise and refuse to be quiet. Sarah's voice strengthened. Some of you are going to face retaliation for being here today. Some of you will lose jobs or opportunities because you chose to support reform. Some of you will be told that you're too aggressive, too demanding, too unwilling to work within the system. When that happens, I want you to remember something. The system wasn't designed for you. It was designed to extract your labor while minimizing your power. Refusing to accept that isn't aggression, it's self-respect. She stepped back from the podium. We have a lot of work ahead. Congressional hearings, policy implementation, institutional oversight. It's going to be hard and slow and frustrating, but it's also going to be worth it. Because 3 weeks ago, a security guard touched my shoulder and thought he could make me leave. Today, we're standing in the same building, planning how to restructure American healthcare. That's not luck. That's what happens when people decide they're done being silent. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Afterwards, Sarah stood in the lobby, the same lobby where she'd been stopped, watching participants network and strategize. Rachel appeared beside her. You okay? Yeah, just thinking about how different this feels from 3 weeks ago. You mean when you were being publicly humiliated? I mean when I was alone against a system that assumed I didn't matter. Rachel smiled. You were never alone. You just didn't know it yet. They walked outside together. The October air had gotten colder, winter approaching, but the sky was clear, and the afternoon light made everything sharp and defined. Patricia and Eleanor were waiting by the car, both looking exhausted but satisfied. Senator Huang's office called, Eleanor said. The reform bill is going to committee vote next week. They have the votes to pass. That's faster than expected, Sarah said, because 43 arrests and a national scandal made opposition politically toxic. No one wants to be seen protecting the people who tried to kill healthcare oversight. Patricia pulled out her tablet. Also, the Medical Worker Protection Act passed the House this morning. Federal whistleblower status for anyone reporting healthcare institutional failures. Criminal penalties for retaliation. It's everything we asked for. Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of work that mattered reaching completion. What about Cross's trial? Federal prosecutors are building a RICO case. They're confident about conviction, but his lawyers are good. It'll take time. Time is fine, as long as justice happens. They drove back to Eleanor's foundation offices, no longer a secret location, now officially the headquarters of the Healthcare Transparency Alliance. The office was chaos, with new staff being hired, systems being built, requests for assistance pouring in from healthcare workers across the country who'd seen what happened and wanted to report their own institutional failures. Sarah's phone buzzed with a call from Colonel Hayes. Dr. Mitchell, I have news. The Army just announced they're reopening the Kandahar investigation. Sarah's stomach tightened. Why? Because enough people raise questions that they can't ignore it anymore. But here's the thing. They're not investigating your conduct. They're investigating the people who tried to use it against you. Turns out Vincent Cross's firm had contacts with military contractors who had access to personnel files. The leak of your records was illegal and coordinated. They're pursuing charges. So I'm not under investigation? You were never under investigation. You were cleared completely in 2016. But now the people who weaponized your service record are going to face consequences for it. Hayes paused. Sarah, for what it's worth, what you did in Kandahar was exactly right. You saved a child's life. That's what we're supposed to do. After the call ended, Sarah sat quietly for a moment. Then she pulled out her laptop and started writing. The essay was titled, What I Learned from Being Humiliated in Front of 800 People. She wrote about standing outside the hotel, about the security guard's hand on her shoulder, about the moment she decided to document everything instead of fighting back. She wrote about systems that valued appearance over substance and how those systems damaged everyone they touched. But mostly, she wrote about what happened next. About Rachel standing up in the ballroom. About whistleblowers risking everything to provide evidence. About journalists verifying information under tight deadlines. About congressional representatives choosing principle over political safety. About ordinary people deciding they were done accepting institutional corruption. She published it on the Healthcare Transparency Alliance website at 6 p.m. By midnight, it had been read 2 million times. By morning, it was being taught in medical schools, discussed in ethics classes, and referenced in policy debates. 2 months later, Sarah stood in Washington, D.C.'s federal courthouse watching Vincent Cross's sentencing. He'd been convicted on 14 counts, including fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. The judge sentenced him to 28 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. As marshals led him away, Cross looked back at Sarah one final time. His expression wasn't angry or defiant. It was something worse, incomprehension. He genuinely couldn't understand how he'd lost, how his perfectly constructed system had collapsed, how one woman standing outside a hotel had triggered a cascade that ended with him in handcuffs. Sarah understood, though. He'd lost because he'd believed institutional power was invincible. He'd lost because he'd assumed people would always choose comfort over courage. He'd lost because he'd built a system designed to silence opposition and never considered what happened when opposition refused to be silent. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah gave a brief statement. Vincent Cross spent years building a system to protect healthcare industry profits at the expense of patient safety. Today, he faced accountability for that. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning of making sure this kind of systematic corruption never happens again. Dr. Mitchell, what's next for you? Continuing the work. The Healthcare Transparency Alliance is investigating 17 more hospital systems. We're supporting legislative reform in 32 states. We're building protective infrastructure for whistleblowers. And we're making sure that what happened to me and what happens to healthcare workers every day becomes impossible to ignore. Any message for people watching? Sarah thought about it for a moment. If you see injustice and you have the power to document it, document it. If you have evidence of wrongdoing and you can safely share it, share it. If you're being told to accept things that are unacceptable, refute. Systems change when enough people decide they're done enabling corruption. You don't need to be special to make a difference. You just need to be willing to stand up when it matters. 6 months after that October night outside the Ocean View Grand, Sarah received an invitation to speak at the American Medical Association's annual conference, the same organization that had initially supported Castellanos' opposition to her investigation. They'd since reversed position, embraced transparency reforms, and wanted Sarah to keynote their main session. She accepted. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when she walked onto that stage. 6 months earlier, she'd been stopped at a hotel entrance and told she didn't belong. Now she was addressing the most prestigious gathering in American medicine, and they were hanging on her every word. 6 months ago, she began, a security guard put his hand on my shoulder and told me I didn't belong at an elite medical event. He was right. I didn't belong in a system that valued credentials over character, that protected institutional reputation over patient safety, that allowed systematic corruption to flourish because challenging it was inconvenient. She paused. But here's what I've learned. None of us belong in that system. Not the nurses working double shifts for inadequate pay. Not the patients whose concerns get dismissed because they don't have medical degrees. Not the doctors trying to practice ethical medicine while administrators pressure them to prioritize billing over care. And not the institutions that have spent decades building protective structures instead of fixing problems. Sarah pulled up an image behind her. The now famous screenshot from Melissa Torres's live stream showing the moment everything changed. This moment went viral because it was visible, but invisible versions of this moment happen constantly in healthcare. Every time a nurse's observation gets ignored and a patient suffers. Every time a whistleblower gets fired for reporting safety concerns. Every time an institution chooses a quiet settlement over public accountability. Those moments didn't generate hashtags or trending topics, but they mattered just as much. She advanced to the next slide, statistics from the Healthcare Transparency Alliance's first 6 months. Since we started operations, we've received over 12,000 reports of institutional failures. We've documented systematic problems at 147 hospital systems. We've supported 83 whistleblowers through legal processes. We've contributed evidence to 42 federal investigations. And we've helped push through healthcare reform legislation in 19 states. The audience was completely silent. But the most important number is this: 374. That's how many healthcare workers have contacted us saying they were about to quit medicine because of institutional abuse, but decided to stay because they saw that change was possible. Those 374 people represent thousands of patients who will receive better care, countless families who will benefit from their expertise, and a future where healthcare might actually serve the people it's supposed to help. Sarah stepped forward, away from the podium. I didn't start this fight to destroy healthcare institutions. I started it because I believe healthcare can be better. I believe we can have systems that value competence over status, that protect whistleblowers instead of punishing them, that prioritize patient safety over institutional reputation. I believe we can build something worth belonging to. She let that settle. The work isn't done. Vincent Cross is in prison, but the systems he exploited still exist. Regulatory agencies are being reformed, but institutional resistance is strong. Laws are changing, but enforcement requires constant vigilance. We've won important battles, but the war for healthcare accountability continues every single day. Sarah pulled up one final image, a photograph from that morning showing the Healthcare Transparency Alliance's new office in Boston. Through the window, you could see the Ocean View Grand Hotel 3 blocks away. We chose that office location deliberately. Every morning when I arrive at work, I see the building where I was humiliated. I see the entrance where I was told I didn't belong. And I remember that the distance between that moment and this one, between being dismissed as worthless and addressing the AMA's annual conference, is the distance we travel when we refuse to accept injustice. She looked across the audience. Some of you participated in opposing my investigation. Some of you stayed silent when you should have spoken up. Some of you protected systems that harmed people because challenging them felt too risky. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to do better, starting now, starting with the choices you make today about what you'll accept and what you'll fight. The standing ovation was immediate and prolonged. But Sarah noticed something else: people crying, people who looked shaken, people experiencing the uncomfortable recognition of their own complicity. After the speech, dozens of people approached her. Some wanted to share their own stories of institutional failure. Some wanted to volunteer with the Alliance. Some wanted forgiveness for their silence. One older physician, a man who'd been on the National Medical Ethics Board before it was dissolved, waited until everyone else had left. Dr. Mitchell, I voted against your investigation. I believed Castellano when he said you were dangerous to healthcare institutions. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. What changed your mind? My granddaughter is in nursing school. She told me she almost quit because the culture was so toxic. She said watching what you did made her believe she could survive and maybe even change things. He paused. I realized I'd spent my career protecting a system that was driving people like her away. That's not the legacy I want. Sarah shook his hand. Then help us build something better. That evening, Sarah sat in her office looking out at the Boston skyline. Rachel appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick with new reports. We got 14 new whistleblower cases today. 3 from hospitals in California, 4 from insurance companies, 7 from pharmaceutical companies. Also, Senator Huang wants you to testify again about the Medical Device Safety Act. How's the staff handling the volume? We're hiring faster, but it's still overwhelming. Every investigation we complete generates 3 more reports from people who finally feel safe coming forward. Sarah took the folder and started reading. Each case was its own story of institutional failure, personal courage, and systems that needed fixing. Each one mattered. Rachel, do you ever regret this? Leaving emergency nursing to run the Alliance? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I miss the bedside work, the immediate satisfaction of helping someone in crisis. But then I remember that every case we investigate helps hundreds of patients by fixing systems. The scale is different. Do you think we're winning? I think we're changing the conversation. 6 months ago, healthcare institutions could hide failures behind settlements and silence. Now they know someone's watching. That's not victory, but it's progress. Sarah looked back out the window at the city. Somewhere in those buildings, nurses were working double shifts. Doctors were making difficult calls. Patients were trusting systems that sometimes failed them. And hopefully, more people were refusing to accept that failure as inevitable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Turn on CNN." Sarah pulled up the live stream. Breaking news banner. Former hospital CEO sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for healthcare fraud and conspiracy. The CEO in question was someone they'd exposed in their third investigation, a man who'd systematically overbilled Medicare while cutting patient care costs to maximize profits. He'd seemed untouchable 6 months ago. Now he was going to prison. Rachel saw it too. "That's number 17. 17 people imprisoned because of investigations we supported." 17 people who were destroying healthcare for profit, Sarah corrected. "That matters." They worked late into the evening, reviewing cases, coordinating with investigators, preparing for upcoming congressional testimony. At some point, Eleanor stopped by with dinner. "You two need to eat and sleep, and occasionally remember that sustainable change requires sustainable pace." "We're fine," Sarah said, not looking up from her laptop. "You're burning out. I've seen it before. People who fight important battles sometimes forget they have to survive the war, not just win individual fights." Eleanor set down food containers and sat. "I'm proud of what you've built, but I need you to be smart about sustaining it." Sarah finally looked up. "How?" "By building infrastructure that doesn't depend on you personally, by training others to do the work you're doing, by creating systems that survive even if something happens to you." Eleanor's expression was serious. "Vincent Cross is in prison, but there are others who think like him. People who view your work as a threat and who might take actions to eliminate that threat. You need succession plans." It was sobering but necessary. Sarah spent the next 2 hours working with Rachel and Eleanor to document their processes, identify potential leaders within the alliance, and create contingency plans for continuing the work if any of them couldn't. By midnight, they had a comprehensive framework. The Healthcare Transparency Alliance would survive beyond its founders. The mission would continue regardless of individual casualties. 3 months later, 9 months after that October night, Sarah stood at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. She'd come to honor a name etched in the black granite, Captain David Mitchell, her father, who died in combat 2 years before she was born. She'd never known him, but her mother had told her stories. He'd been a combat medic, just like Sarah would become. He'd believed in service, in standing up for what mattered, in refusing to accept injustice even when fighting it was dangerous. "I think he'd be proud of what you've done," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find Colonel Hayes along with 3 other senior military medical officers. "We wanted to tell you in person," Hayes continued. "The Army is establishing the Mitchell Award for Medical Ethics, annual recognition for military medical professionals who demonstrate exceptional moral courage. Your father's name, but inspired by your example." Sarah felt tears threatening but held them back. That's not necessary." "It absolutely is. What you did, exposing corruption, facing down institutional power, refusing to be silenced, that's the definition of moral courage. It should be recognized and encouraged." One of the other officers stepped forward. "Dr. Mitchell, we also wanted to apologize. The Army leaked your Kandahar records illegally at Vincent Cross's request. That violation has been investigated and the responsible parties court-martialed. But the damage to your reputation can't be undone with prosecutions. We're issuing a formal commendation recognizing your exemplary service and officially repudiating any suggestion that your conduct was questionable." Sarah accepted the commendation, a formal document signed by the Army Surgeon General and the Secretary of Defense. It stated clearly that her decisions in Kandahar had been medically appropriate, ethically sound, and deserving of recognition rather than criticism. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This matters more than you know." After they left, Sarah stood alone before the memorial. She placed her hand on her father's name, feeling the cold stone beneath her fingers. "I hope I've honored what you believed in," she whispered. Standing up, refusing to quit, making the fight worth something. The stone offered no answer, but Sarah felt a sense of completion she hadn't known she needed. 1 year after the hotel incident, the Ocean View Grand hosted another event. But this time it was the Healthcare Transparency Alliance's first annual conference. a gathering of whistleblowers, investigators, reformed administrators, and healthcare workers committed to accountability. Sarah stood outside the Platinum entrance, the same spot where Marcus Webb had shoved her shoulder. A plaque had been installed in the ground, marking the location with a simple inscription, "Where Transparency Began, October 2025. Rachel joined her, along with Patricia, Eleanor, and dozens of others who'd become part of the movement. "Ready?" Rachel asked. "More than ready." They walked through the entrance together, not sneaking in, not being challenged, but entering as honored guests whose work had changed American healthcare. The ballroom was filled with over 1,000 people, all of them committed to the same mission. Sarah took the podium for her opening remarks. "1 year ago, I stood outside this building being told I didn't belong. Today, we're gathered inside it to celebrate how far we've come and plan how much further we'll go. That transformation didn't happen because of one person or one viral moment. It happened because thousands of people decided they were done accepting institutional corruption as inevitable." She pulled up statistics on the screen. In 1 year, we've investigated 231 healthcare institutions. We've documented systematic failures affecting over 4 million patients. We've supported 318 whistleblowers through legal processes. We've contributed to 87 successful prosecutions. And we've helped pass healthcare reform legislation in 31 states and at the federal level. Applause filled the room. But more important than any number is the change in culture. A year ago, healthcare workers who reported institutional failures expected to be fired and blacklisted. Today, they have federal protection and support systems. A year ago, hospital systems could bury problems with quiet settlements. Today, transparency is legally required. A year ago, patient safety complaints disappeared into administrative processes designed to protect institutions. Today, independent oversight ensures those complaints get investigated properly. Sarah paused, looking across the audience. "We haven't fixed everything. Healthcare corruption still exists. Institutional bias still damages people. Regulatory capture still threatens oversight. But we've proven that change is possible. We've shown that ordinary people can challenge extraordinary power and win. We've demonstrated that transparency and accountability aren't naive ideals. They're practical necessities for systems that actually serve people." She stepped away from the podium. "So here's my message for year 2. Don't stop. Keep documenting. Keep reporting. Keep pushing. The institutions we're challenging have centuries of momentum and billions of dollars defending them. They're hoping we'll get tired, distracted, or comfortable with partial victories. Don't give them that satisfaction. Stay angry. Stay focused. Stay committed to the belief that healthcare should serve patients, not profits." The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. After the conference, Sarah walked back to that spot outside the entrance. The October evening was cold, exactly like it had been 1 year earlier. But everything else was different. Rachel appeared beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much can change in a year when people refuse to stay silent. Do you ever regret it? Everything that happened? Everything you had to sacrifice?" Sarah thought about her old life, the comfortable academic positions, the professional relationships that had ended when she chose transparency over discretion, the career path she'd abandoned to build something new. "No regrets. This matters more than anything I was doing before." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city move around them. "You know what the best part is?" Rachel said finally. "Somewhere right now, a nurse is standing up to an abusive doctor because she saw what you did. Somewhere, a patient is demanding accountability because they know it's possible. Somewhere, a hospital administrator is choosing transparency because hiding problems is no longer worth the risk. You didn't just change policy, you changed what people believe is possible." Sarah smiled. "We changed it, all of us together." As they walked back inside, Sarah thought about that moment 1 year ago, when Marcus Webb's hand had landed on her shoulder. She thought about the choice she'd made in that instant, to document rather than fight, to stay calm rather than react, to trust that transparency would reveal truth better than confrontation. That choice had led to everything that followed: the live stream, the investigation, the arrests, the reforms, the movement. One moment, one choice, one woman refusing to accept that being dismissed meant being defeated. And now, 1 year later, American healthcare would never be the same. Inside the ballroom, the celebration continued. Music played. People laughed and planned and built connections that would sustain the work ahead. Sarah stood at the edge of it all, watching the movement she'd helped create grow beyond her, exactly as it should. Eleanor appeared with champagne. To the woman who wouldn't leave when she was told, Sarah raised her glass. To everyone who refuses to accept injustice, to the whistleblowers and the witnesses, to the nurses and the patients, to everyone who believes healthcare should serve people rather than profit, this victory belongs to all of them. They drank, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because the fight was over, but because it mattered. Because every investigation, every reform, every person protected from institutional abuse justified everything she'd sacrificed to get here. The evening ended late. Sarah was the last to leave, walking through the empty ballroom one final time. She stopped at the spot where she'd delivered her keynote speech 1 year ago, where she'd stood in front of 800 people and told them exactly what institutional bias had cost. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for showing me that standing up matters. I just filed a whistleblower complaint about my hospital. I was scared, but then I remembered you outside this building, and I knew I couldn't stay silent." A nurse in Seattle. Sarah read it twice, then saved it with the hundreds of other messages she'd received from people who'd found courage in her example. This was why it mattered. Not the arrests or the reforms or the national recognition, but the individual moments when people chose courage over compliance. When they refused to accept that systems couldn't change, when they stood up despite being scared because they'd seen someone else do it and survive. Sarah walked out through the platinum entrance, the same doors that had been closed to her a year ago. She passed the plaque marking where everything had begun. And she stepped into the Boston night, ready for whatever came next. Because she'd learned something crucial in the past year. Institutional power looks invincible right up until the moment it collapses. Corruption seems permanent until transparency makes it impossible. Injustice appears inevitable until enough people decide it isn't. And sometimes all it takes is one person, standing outside a hotel, being told she doesn't belong, who refuses to believe that story and decides to write a different ending. 1 year ago, they tried to make her invisible. Today, she'd made corruption impossible to ignore. And tomorrow, the work would continue. Because that's what mattered. Not one victory, but the sustained commitment to keep fighting, keep documenting, keep demanding better until healthcare actually served the people it was supposed to help. Sarah Mitchell walked into the night, past the spot where a security guard had touched her shoulder, past the entrance where she'd been humiliated, past the building where everything had changed. And she smiled. Because she'd proven something they'd never expected. The woman they thought didn't belong had just rebuilt the entire system around principles they'd spent decades trying to bury. Respect, transparency, accountability, justice. The things that should have been there all along.